Hey guys, tonight we slide straight into velvet-draped decadence and roasted extravagance. You're not just in ancient Rome, you are ancient Rome. And not some common toga-draped nobody clapping politely at the forum. No, tonight, you're rich. The kind of rich that makes senators flinch and poets beg to immortalize your eyebrows. You live in marble mansions that echo with flute music and sarcasm. And your biggest daily challenge? Choosing whether to start your evening with oysters from Spain or peacock tongues from Carthage. You probably won't survive this, your liver certainly won't, but hey. That's half the fun. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun sets behind the Palatine Hill, and your estate glows in the golden hour like a temple of indulgence. Slaves in clean tunics bustle like a well-rehearsed orchestra. You don't walk into dinner, you recline into it. Literally, one arm propped on plush cushions, the other lazily holding a goblet shaped like a sea nymph. The mosaics underfoot glimmer, not just because they're made of colored glass and gold tesserae, but because someone buffed them with imported goat milk polish this morning. No big deal. First comes the gustatio, the appetizer course. But forget olives and cheese. That's for the lower orders. Your table, a 12-foot slab of veined Numidian marble, groans under bronze trays of sea urchin foam, pheasant eggs pickled in saffron, and oysters kept alive in wine until moments ago. One servant fans you, another spritzes your face with rosewater. A third just stands there holding a silver toothpick. You might need it. Or you might dramatically toss it across the room just to watch him scurry. Next comes the prima mensa. And this is where things get ridiculous. A live chef slices flamingo breast tableside, performing with the flair of a circus ringmaster. You nod approvingly. The flamingo is moist. You only eat the left thigh. Tradition? Superstition? Historians still argue whether the elite truly believed certain cuts gave them virility or just liked being weirdly specific. Between courses, musicians play the lyre while a slave juggles figs. He's new, a little sweaty. You like that. Shows he cares. The air smells of cinnamon, myrrh, and ambition. Tonight's main attraction, peacock. Not just the bird, but its entire presentation. Feathers reassembled after roasting, a crown placed on its head. It stares at you like it knows this is your fourth one this week. You shrug. The gods wouldn't have created such colors if they weren't meant to be basted in honey and cinnamon. You sip Falernian wine, vintage. Obviously, so old it technically qualifies as Roman history. It tastes like raisins and power. You swirl, sniff, sip, then snap your fingers and pour it on the floor as a libation. Half devotion, half performance. Everyone claps. You smirk. Dessert? Candied violets, almond paste shaped like arrows, and dates stuffed with crushed pistachios and a dash of irony. You barely taste them over the postprandial entertainment. A mime reenacting the myth of Orpheus using nothing but interpretive eyebrow movements and a lot of pelvic commitment. Your guests chuckle politely. One woman, draped in a see-through stola embroidered with pearls, whispers to another, "This mime's better than last week's contortionist." You pretend not to hear. You definitely hear. You love hearing. One guest tries to impress with a philosophical comment about moderation. You raise an eyebrow so high it nearly dislocates. Moderation. You repeat, as a virtue for people who can't afford the full menu. Laughter. Someone toasts you. You let them. At one point, you tap your foot, and a slave pours warm perfumed water over your hands. You dry them on linen from Egypt. The thread count is so high it could be a modern marketing gimmick. You're pretty sure it was woven by monks trained in silence and guilt. The ceiling of the triclinium, your dining room, is retractable. Just in case you decide tonight's vibe calls for moonlight. You click your tongue. It slides open. Stars emerge. A servant tosses rose petals from a hidden balcony. One lands on your goblet. You sip around it. This is how the elite do dinner. And you're just getting started. One of your guests, a minor senator with ambitious eyebrows, tries to steer the conversation toward politics. You yawn theatrically. Save the republic for dessert. You mutter. The others laugh, mostly because they're nervous. You are. After all, richer than the gods and more temperamental than Jupiter on a slow thunder day. As the evening stretches, servants quietly replace every empty dish with something even more absurd. Stuffed dormice, truffled hare in pastry shaped like the Colosseum. One tray carries a fish baked inside a pig, which is stuffed with songbirds, which are themselves filled with spiced cheese. It's either culinary genius or a crime scene. You shrug, you eat it. Occasionally, a quiet clink is heard beneath the table. That's your food taster. Poor guy eats everything 10 minutes before you do, just in case some less imaginative elite tried to poison you with mushroom mousse. Honestly, you like him. He's got good instincts and a high tolerance. Every now and then, you lean back and survey your guests. The way they cling to your every smirk. The way they pretend not to notice your new sapphire earring, an Alexandrian treasure allegedly owned by Cleopatra's third cousin. Possibly, probably not, but the story is better than the truth. Your pets? Yes. They join dinner. A particularly spoiled monkey in a gold collar screeches when served plain figs. You snap for the kitchen. Cinnamon. And honey. Again. The monkey nods approvingly. You raised him well. Meanwhile, one slave plays a single note over and over on the flute. Not because it's artistic, but because you find it hilarious. That note has been driving your guests slowly mad for over an hour. You might let him stop soon. Maybe, probably not. As the meal wanes, someone recites a poem praising your house, your generosity, and, awkwardly, your calves. It rhymes poorly, but the effort is there. You reward him with a leftover chicken wing wrapped in silk. He weeps with gratitude. A philosopher, not yours. Some guests plus one mutters something about how true virtue lies in simplicity. You laugh so hard you nearly choke on a fig. Simplicity, you say, is a myth invented by poor men and bald stoics. The philosopher begins to protest, but a knowing glance from you makes him reconsider. He switches to praising your marble floor instead. Wise choice. It is spectacular. As the final course, sugar-dusted poppy cakes, is served. One servant begins reading a scroll of gossip from the forum. This week's scandal. A praetor caught commissioning erotic poetry about his own statue. You lean in, delighted. Read it again, you say, but slower this time. The night ends not with a whimper but with a chorus, literally. You've hired a small children's choir to sing your name in harmonies so sweet they make your guests misty-eyed. Or maybe that's the incense. Hard to say. You rise. Finally, as your guests applaud, you give a tiny bow, just enough to let the jeweled clasp on your tunic catch the lamplight. Then you disappear through a velvet curtain, leaving behind a trail of sandalwood smoke and at least 2 marriage proposals. The servants begin clearing the aftermath. Half-eaten peacocks, empty wine jugs, a shattered lyre, don't ask. The mime is asleep under the table. One of your pets is gnawing on a tiara. It's chaos. It's glorious. This is Rome. This is dinner. And you absolutely own the night. Morning comes not with birdsong, but with the gentle rustle of silken drapes pulled aside by someone whose entire job is making sure sunlight never touches your face uninvited. You stretch luxuriously beneath Egyptian cotton dyed Tyrian purple, worth more than most people's homes, and let out a sigh that smells faintly of last night's garlic dormice and triumph. You don't wake up so much as you are restored to consciousness. Outside, Rome buzzes with chaos, merchants shouting, beggars pleading, and carts rattling down stone streets. But you don't hear any of it. Your countryside villa, a modest 800-acre sprawl nestled in the hills beyond the city, is a sanctuary wrapped in vineyards, olive groves, and the quiet smugness of inherited wealth. You trudge through your morning like a deity on vacation. A servant helps you into your casual day toga, a garment that somehow weighs 15 pounds but feels lighter than air. Another kneels to buckle your sandals, which are stitched with tiny pearls that click when you walk, like applause from the ground itself. Today, you've retreated from urban chaos to the countryside villa, not for rest, though there's that, but because even someone of your standing needs a little space from politics, social climbing, and, frankly, the smell of Rome in summer. The villa is designed like a lover, seductive, clever, and always a little too much. Pillared porticos overlook vineyards where workers scurry like ants, trimming vines with obsessive precision. Every grape has a destiny. And most of them end up in your goblet. You wander past an ornamental pond, where swans float like expensive metaphors. One has a gold ring around its neck. You named it Cicero, mostly to annoy the real Cicero next time he visits. The garden smells like jasmine and ambition. At breakfast, served in the peristyle courtyard under a mosaic of Apollo and his surprisingly well-toned abs, you nibble on warm bread, goat cheese, and figs that may or may not have been personally serenaded during harvest. You only eat 3. You're feeling modest. Slaves fan you gently while your steward reads the day's updates from the estate. Grain yields up. Wine barrels full. 1 goat missing. You nod solemnly at each. Especially the goat. You'll ask your astrologer if it's a sign. This villa is not just a getaway, it's a performance. Every pathway is lined with cypress trees trimmed within an inch of their lives. The main hallway features frescoes depicting scenes from Homer. Although one panel now awkwardly resembles your uncle after he donated generously to the artist. You stroll into the tablinum, your private office. Though you rarely touch the scrolls. Too dusty. Instead, you gaze out at your land and contemplate improvements. Perhaps a marble fountain shaped like Neptune? Or a sundial that only tells leisure time. Historians still argue whether these kinds of elite additions served symbolic purpose or were just ridiculous flexes. Just past the orchards lies the vineyard, your pride and passive income. You haven't worked a day in your life, but you nod seriously when talking to your vintner. Earthy, you say after sipping the latest batch. Bold, he beams. You have no idea what that means. Neither does he. By midday, it's time for your walk, not for health, but for visibility. You glide past workers as they bow, women as they curtsy, and dogs who, frankly, seem unimpressed. One child stops to ask if you're a god. You smile indulgently and whisper, "Only on weekends." Lunch is served under a fig tree that leans just so, like it's posing for a sculpture. The table is small, intimate, just you and your closest confidants, your steward, your Greek tutor, and a dog named Dictator who insists on sitting in the best seat. You eat garum-drizzled greens, fresh trout from your own stream, and honey-drenched barley cakes. Between bites, your tutor recites philosophy. Happiness, he says, is living in accordance with nature. You look around at the marble columns, imported perfumes, and the peacock pacing nearby in a bejeweled collar. Nailed it, you reply. Your steward updates you on political rumors. Some tribune is trying to introduce a grain law. Some senator's villa burned down after a particularly spicy dinner party. You nod, pretending to care, but your eyes are on the mosaic beneath the table. It's a scene of Bacchus riding a leopard. You like to imagine it's you. The resemblance is eerie. Afternoon is for hobbies. You stroll to your etc., a shaded patio filled with scrolls, cushions, and dramatic lighting, and pretend to read poetry. Mostly, you nap, but when guests arrive, you quote something vaguely tragic and they nod, deeply impressed. One of your passions is landscaping. Not doing it, obviously, overseeing it. You direct your groundskeepers like generals in a campaign. That tree is leaning too leftist. Those roses need more imperial flair. You debate installing a labyrinth. Not for function, just to lose guests you don't like. Occasionally, you receive visitors. Lesser elites trying to climb the social ladder by flattering your statues. They marvel at your pool shaped like the Tiber, your bathroom tiled in ivory, your guest house that's somehow nicer than most city domus. You let them wander, let them envy. They leave gifts, gold, exotic perfumes, poems, and you pretend you don't already have 8 of each. Evening arrives in a slow, syrupy descent. You dress for dinner again, of course. Villa attire, slightly more relaxed, but no less opulent. The dining hall here is cozier. If cozy means walls encrusted with amethysts and a view of sunset over the olive grove that's been carefully edited by nature and 5 full-time gardeners. Tonight's menu: roasted boar with apples, lentils spiced with cinnamon, and a novelty dish you requested, grapes peeled and frozen in mountain snow. You laugh when it arrives. Who needs practicality when you have 6 men to chase snow up hills? One guest tries to bring up philosophy again. Epicurus said. You cut him off with a lazy wave. Epicurus never saw this view. You toast yourself. Your chef unveils a dessert sculpture of you riding a dolphin made of marzipan. You chuckle. The nose is wrong, but the ego is accurate. Later, in your private cubicula, you soak in a tub filled with milk and crushed roses. You're not entirely sure what it does for your skin, but you like the smell and the way servants rush to filter out the petals before they clog the drain. You drift off thinking about improvements to your property. A new wing? A water clock that sings? Maybe a mosaic of your life in 1.000 tiles? Your ego says yes. Your budget says, what budget? Here, in the calm of your estate, you're more than just rich. You're eternal, or at least you like to think so. And somewhere, far away, Rome boils and bickers. But here, in the heart of your pleasure empire, only the cicadas in the fountain dare interrupt your dreams. The city pulls you back in like a jealous lover, loud, hot, dramatic, and always whispering your name behind silk fans and marble columns. Your carriage creaks through the streets of Rome at sunrise, shaded by linen canopies and flanked by slaves clearing a path. You don't walk, you glide, and when the wooden wheels thump over uneven stones, it's not a flaw, it's a percussion section in your personal entrance fanfare. You've returned from the countryside villa, not because you had to, but because there are certain displays of wealth that only work in the city. Like owning 6 townhouses on the same street, just to keep your enemies guessing, or hiring a troupe of Syrian acrobats to perform cartwheels through your atrium every morning before breakfast. Country air is lovely, but nothing says, I've arrived, like showing up late to the forum wearing a tunic dyed with so much Tyrian purple it borders on treason. You step out of your carriage and into the marble embrace of your urban domus, your city house, which is somehow grander than most temples. The floor of your vestibule sparkles with tiny black tiles spelling out, Cave Canem, in elaborate cursive. Which means, beware of dog. Of course, your actual dog is asleep somewhere on a pile of silk pillows, possibly wearing a ruby-studded collar and dreaming of roasted duck. Your doorman greets you with a practiced bow and the slightly haunted eyes of someone who's memorized the names of 77 guests scheduled for your dinner party later. You nod, regal and a little distracted. You're already composing a mental checklist. Whip the mime into shape. Choose wine amphory for each course. Make sure the senator with the stutter isn't seated next to the poet with the cough. But first, your daily bath ritual. The balneum inside your house is heated, of course. Your architect made sure of that. You slide into the tepidarium like a swan into a spa. Steam curling around you like gossip at a funeral. Attendants scrub you with olive oil, then scrape it off with strigils made of polished bronze. You close your eyes and sigh, not because you're exhausted, but because sighing is a luxury in itself. The kind of slow exhale that says, I own 6 vineyards and a senator's loyalty. The caldarium scalds. The frigidarium bites. You endure both like a champion. Your body, pampered and perfumed, is a monument to excess. You emerge glowing, like Venus from the sea, except with better real estate. Dressed again, this time in a tunic so finely woven it feels illegal, you stroll into your atrium. Clients are already waiting, dozens of them, all here for their morning salutatio, the daily greeting ritual where lesser mortals line up to pay respects and, ideally, get a little financial help or political backing. You walk the line like an emperor in training. A nod here, a coin there. One old client tries to kiss your hand. You offer a ring instead. It smells faintly of cinnamon and dominance. This is where your wealth turns political. The Patronus clientela system makes you a godfather of favors. And you adore it. Each client you support adds weight to your public image. Each coin you give out is an investment in your reputation. This isn't charity, it's theater. And the best seat is always yours. By midday, you head to the forum. Not for errands. No, you don't run errands. You glide through civic life like a polished dagger through a toga. The forum is your stage, a place where senators argue, philosophers gesture, and you make appearances. People part like the sea when you approach. You stroll past the Basilica Julia, past moneylenders shouting exchange rates, past beggars whose bowls you fill with a dramatic flick of the wrist. One child thanks you too earnestly, so you give her an extra coin and say, tell your friends. Tell everyone. The Basilica Aemilia gleams in the sun and you duck inside for a whispered chat with your broker. Grain stocks are up. Egyptian imports delayed. Someone's cousin is getting married. Opportunity for a gift that's both generous and subtly condescending. You take notes with a stylus carved from elephant ivory. The notebook is waxed, soft, dark, and about as useful for actual bookkeeping as a sponge is for a sword fight. The Senate is in session. But you arrive fashionably late. Not because you're lazy, but because entering during a heated debate guarantees all eyes are on you. And oh, the eyes. Jealous, calculating, some admiring, others terrified. You give a brief speech about virtue and civic duty. Careful to sound just humble enough to pass as sincere. Historians still argue whether speeches like yours actually changed policy or were simply another form of social currency. One senator whispers afterward. You smile like a sphinx and reply, "What's policy if not performance?" By late afternoon, you retreat to your domus for a brief moment of repose. Your garden, green, geometric, and humming with bees trained not to sting you, beckons. You recline with a scroll of Ovid in one hand and a plate of olives in the other. Your pet parrot squawks something rude in Greek. You taught him that. He's doing well. Evening comes fast in the city. So you prepare for tonight's feast. Not dinner, a feast. You've invited 20 guests, but prepared food for 50. The atrium has been cleared and perfumed with crushed mint and rose petals. Musicians warm up in the corner. Slaves rush about with trays of dates, wine, and nervous energy. You check the seating chart. Every arrangement a power move. The senator you admire sits beside the actress you're probably flirting with. The philosopher who insulted your eyebrows last month is seated next to the peacock. Yes. That peacock. You look at the chart and smile. It's perfect, diabolical, delicious. As guests begin arriving, your hall fills with laughter, harp music, and the soft chime of silver utensils on polished stone. The meal starts simple, honeyed cheese, figs, and spiced nuts, but quickly escalates into something almost mythological. Flaming dishes, exotic fruits, a camel-shaped cake. Yes, a cake. Someone tries to toast you mid-course. You gently interrupt with your own toast, longer, wittier, and ending with a quote you made up on the spot. Everyone nods sagely. Later, someone will have it carved into a villa wall and misattribute it to Cicero. You give gifts mid-meal. Not because it's a holiday, but because it's you. One guest receives a bolt of silk from Parthia. Another, a lapis lazuli brooch shaped like Jupiter's lightning bolt. You give the least impressive gift to the richest guest. A gentle reminder. Your wealth is measured in whim. Dessert arrives as a procession. Candied pears carried by children dressed as cupids. Almond pastries shaped like miniature senators. One tray holds nothing but chilled rosewater in tiny glass flutes, luxury distilled into liquid form. And finally, the entertainment. A troupe of mimes performs your life story, only the flattering parts. Naturally, a few jokes land hard, especially the bit where you heroically rescue a basket of wine from a collapsing table. Your guests roar. You dab your eyes with a silk napkin. Art, you whisper. As the night winds down, you escort your guests out, offering each a small token, incense, rare spices, or just a pointed compliment that they'll repeat to strangers tomorrow. You return to your chambers, your body humming with wine and victory. The city sleeps, mostly. Somewhere, a fight breaks out. Somewhere else, lovers tangle in shadowed corners. But in your domus, all is calm, all is golden. You step onto your balcony and look out over Rome. The rooftops shimmer in moonlight. Fires flicker in braziers. The Tiber glows faintly like a lazy silver snake. This city is yours, not officially, of course. But unofficially? Totally. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Only better. You don't wake up to a rooster. That's for peasants. You wake up to the soft rustle of silk curtains, the scent of sandalwood wafting from a nearby censer, and the gentle voice of your cubicularius, your personal bedroom attendant, murmuring that it's time to greet the day. You stretch beneath imported linen sheets and blink at the frescoed ceiling above you. A cherub winks back. It might be the wine from last night, or it might just be good art. The bedchamber is quiet, except for the faint gurgle of the indoor fountain and the muffled sounds of early morning activity in the rest of the domus. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and land on floors inlaid with warm mosaic. Warmed by hypocausts, Those clever underfloor heating systems that whisper, "Rich person lives here." You don't dress yourself. Of course not. You stand with practiced nonchalance while your body slaves bring out your tunics. You picked the white one with the purple clavis, narrow stripe today. Not the wide one. You're not a senator this morning. Just someone fabulously wealthy with errands to run. By errands, you mean shopping. And not the grab a few apples kind. No. You're about to orchestrate a retail symphony in the heart of Rome's commercial belly, the markets of Trajan. You step outside and immediately feel the day warming. Sunlight hits the rooftops. Birds argue in Latin. And your entourage swells to a respectable size as you head for the hill. You don't even have to speak. People make space for you. A child scurries out of your way, pulling a goat on a rope. A pair of philosophers nod so low they nearly bow. You hear them whisper behind your back. Something about your sandals. They should. They're Egyptian. Crocodile leather. And supposedly cursed by a Nile priest. But only in a flattering way. The markets of Trajan tower ahead. 6 levels of bustling luxury built into the slope of the Quirinal Hill. Think shopping mall meets imperial monument. You enter like you own it, which, honestly, you probably do, at least in part. Rent from your tabernae stalls trickles into your accounts daily. You hardly notice anymore. You start on the upper floors. Those are for high-end items. Spices from Arabia, glass from Syria, silk from beyond Parthia. A vendor offers you saffron in a tiny ivory box. Another shows you lapis earrings, blessed by Venus herself. You buy both, not because you need them, but because the seller looked nervous. And you enjoy the power of whimsical purchasing. You haggle a little, but not seriously. Haggling is sport, not necessity. You let the merchant feel clever when you, reluctantly, agree to a better deal. You wink at him on the way out. He'll tell the story for weeks. As you descend the levels, the tone changes. The crowds thicken. The smells sharpen. Olive oil, fish, sweat, ambition. This is where you see the real Rome. And it sees you. One vendor actually drops a tray of olives when you pass. You pick one up and pop it in your mouth. Delicious. Slightly salty. Just like your sense of humor. You pass a stall selling wigs made of Germanic hair. Yes. You already own 3. Another hawks scrolls, including a banned love poem said to be penned by Julia, Augustus's granddaughter. Naturally, you buy 2 copies. One for your library. One to, accidentally, leave on a certain magistrate's bench during tomorrow's trial. Down on the bottom level, you find what you're really looking for. Artisans. These aren't slick merchants. They're craftsmen with grime under their nails and genius in their hands. One is carving a marble statuette of Mercury mid-stride. You ask for a custom commission. Mercury reclining on a couch, drinking wine. Make him look smug. You add. The sculptor nods solemnly, as if you've just handed him the meaning of life. You spend the rest of the morning selecting gifts. A perfume vial for your sister-in-law, even though you dislike her. A painted lamp for your night chamber. A ridiculous bronze goose for no reason other than it honks when you tip it. Pure luxury. You're about to leave when a street performer catches your eye. She's juggling knives while reciting lines from Plautus. Her timing is perfect. Her rhythm, sharp. You toss her a gold coin and say, "Add me to the act next time." She curtsies so low she disappears for a moment. You like that. Lunch isn't a sit-down affair today. You stop at a papina, a high-end version of a street bar, where they know you and won't serve anything embarrassing like lentils. You order garum-drenched oysters and warm bread, paired with mulsum, honeyed wine that tastes like flirtation. A politician across the room tries to catch your eye. You ignore him for 5 full minutes. Then nod once. It's enough. He'll send you a basket of dates and a vague compliment by sunset. After lunch, your real power move begins. Your visit to the auction house. You stroll in like you're there to buy half the empire, and maybe you are. The atriensis, or auction manager, bows and announces the lots like they're rare stars aligning. There's a marble tub from Antioch, a set of golden goblets from Alexandria, and one shockingly pale Briton with red hair and an expression like thunderclouds. You don't buy people often, too gauche, but this one looks like he could beat most gladiators unconscious with a spoon. You raise a finger. The bid is yours. Historians still argue whether elite Romans purchased exotic slaves to show power. genuine admiration, or simply boredom. You know the truth. It's all three. You bid on a few more things. A pair of Spanish mules. A lute that might be cursed. A chair made from African ebony so polished it reflects your future. Someone tries to outbid you on the tub. You double the offer without looking up. The room gasps. You smile at your reflection in a silver plate. You win. By the time you leave, a small caravan follows you home. Porters carry your new possessions. The Briton sulks behind them, eyeing the city like he's plotting a rebellion. Good for him. You admire spirit. Back at the domus, you barely make it inside before slaves begin cataloging your new acquisitions. The goose goes in the peristyle garden. The tub in the bathhouse. The cursed lute to the music room. Preferably somewhere no one will strum it by accident. You retire to your private study, a room of marble shelves and leather-bound scrolls. Smelling faintly of cinnamon, old ink, and ambition, you pour a cup of wine. Reclining on your reading couch, a secretary enters, holding a list of properties for sale in Campania. You scan it lazily. One villa has a vineyard. Another, a shrine to Fortuna. You circle both. Land ownership is the eternal Roman flex. Forget cash. It's the soil that sings. Before dinner, you host a brief salon. Nothing major. Just a few poets, an astrologer, and that philosopher who always smells like roasted chestnuts. They argue over whether dreams are messages from the gods or indigestion. You throw in a comment about omens and sandals. Everyone laughs. You win the evening. The sun sets behind the city, dyeing the domes and arches orange and gold. From your balcony, Rome looks eternal, because it is. At least from where you're standing. Your wealth stretches beyond coins and carvings. It's in influence, reputation, the way people tilt their heads when you speak, the way they scramble to mimic your style. Tomorrow, perhaps you'll host a private chariot race, or fund a minor temple, or buy an island. But for now, you watch the city exhale, and you exhale with it, sipping wine that once sailed across seas just to grace your cup. Tonight, you dream in gold leaf and alabaster. You wake not so much refreshed as you are reanimated, like a marble statue that's remembered how to breathe. The morning sun filters through your triclinium windows in slatted bands, painting your bedroom walls like a mosaic in motion. Outside, Rome stirs, but inside your domus, everything waits on you. Today, you're planning something particularly grand, a public spectacle that makes your name echo like a chant in the marble corridors of history. Not a party, not a banquet, a game, and not just any game, gladiators, beasts, blood, but just the elegant kind, and a sea of citizens chanting your name whether they love you or fear you. Either works. See, the Roman elite don't just flaunt wealth with imported foods or peacock feather fans. They stage events, and you're staging one that will make senators squirm with envy and poets weep into their inkpots. Your name is going to be on everyone's lips, preferably just before they cheer. Or faint. You're not doing this for fun. Well, not only. You've got political motives simmering under the surface like garum in a bronze pot. Maybe it's about outshining a rival. Or maybe you're gunning for a public office. Or maybe you're just bored of quiet influence and want to thunder your legacy into the bones of the Colosseum. First, venue. Yes, the Flavian Amphitheater, what we now call the Colosseum, is available. And yes, it's a little over the top. But that's kind of the point. You're not just another patrician with deep pockets, you're a spectacle. A lifestyle, a headline. You send word to the editor, the official who oversees public games, that you'd like to sponsor an upcoming set of Munera, gladiatorial games, as a private citizen. A generous contribution to civic life. Really, just don't mention the marble busts you had pre-carved for the occasion. Planning begins. Your villa becomes a command center. Scribes flutter around like well-dressed pigeons. Recording expenses, trainers, costumers, and even a beast wrangler from Numidia arrive to pitch their services. You select the best of the best. The man brings lions. You nod approvingly. The lions look indifferent. You go personally to the Ludus Magnus, Rome's largest gladiator training school, connected to the Colosseum by a tunnel for dramatic entrances and convenient corpse removal. Here, the men train relentlessly, sweating, swinging swords, and sparring with wooden weapons against imaginary opponents. You observe them, not as humans, but as investments. One gladiator catches your eye. Tall, scarred, charismatic, the crowd will love him. He nods at you once. Respectful, not fearful. That's rare. You send a note to his Lanista, trainer, owner, he fights last. Make sure he bleeds just enough. Back at your domus, the invitations go out, not on wax tablets, but via criers and gossip. You're sponsoring a day of games. And Rome takes notice. The buzz grows. Tailors stitch togas just for the occasion. Women whisper your name with curiosity. Men with calculation. Historians still argue whether such spectacles were genuine attempts at civic generosity or just veiled power grabs wrapped in blood and silk. Your friend Marcus says over lunch. You chew on a fig and say, why not both? The day arrives. You don't eat breakfast, not because you're fasting, because anticipation is a better stimulant than any meal. You dress in formal white, pure, serene, a lie the gods themselves would applaud. The toga is crisp, its folds arranged by a man who's spent 10 years doing just that. A chariot waits outside your domus, gold-plated and obnoxious. The horses are glossy, their hooves wrapped in dyed leather. As you ride through the streets, crowds begin to form. Children shout your name. A few throw flower petals. One throws a cucumber. Not ideal, but memorable. The Colosseum looms ahead, grand and hungry. You enter through the gate reserved for elites, the Porta Libitonensis. Although technically that's for the dead, you prefer Porta Triumphalis, the victor's gate, same arch, better vibes. Your private box is a marble masterpiece. Cushions of dyed wool, silver goblets chilled in snow-packed amphorae. You glance around and note who's arrived. That consul you despise is here, pretending not to look impressed. The Vestal virgins sit nearby, serene and slightly judgmental. The emperor's nephew is also here. Perfect. You bow exactly deep enough for etiquette, but not enough to seem desperate. Then, trumpets. The games begin. It starts with a venatio, a beast hunt. Exotic animals, leopards, ostriches, bears, paraded before the crowd before being pitted against trained hunters. One bear simply sits down and refuses to participate. The crowd cheers anyway. Rome loves defiance, even from animals. Next, executions. Criminals condemned ad bastias are led out in chains, acting roles from myth as they're punished. Today, it's Orpheus. He sings. The lions are unimpressed. You sip wine. It's disturbingly smooth. Then, at last, the munera, the gladiatorial combats. Trumpets blast. The crowd roars. Your name is chanted by hundreds. You're not even fighting. And your heart races. 2 retiarii, net fighters with tridents. Battle 2 secutors, heavy-armed opponents. The fight is choreographed chaos, but with real risk. One retiarius snares his foe's leg, pins him, raises the trident. The crowd screams, miss him, let him go. You nod once, mercy. The crowd eats it up. More pairs fight, some die, others are dragged off bleeding but alive. There's blood on the sand, on the shields, even on the statue of Mars watching silently from above. Then, the finale. Your chosen gladiator steps into the arena. He's bare-chested, muscles carved like myths, sword gleaming in the sun. His opponent, a champion from another city, emerges with a roar. The crowd goes feral. They fight like poetry written in screams. You lean forward. This isn't just a duel. It's your climax, your moment. Your man wins, but barely. He stands, panting, sword raised. The loser lies prone, bloodied but alive. The crowd turns to you. Silence falls. This is your moment of judgment. You raise your thumb and tilt it sideways. Not up, not down. Ambiguous, artistic, deliciously theatrical. The emperor's nephew chuckles. You've made an impression. The defeated gladiator is spared. The crowd erupts. You exit before the final cheers fade. You always leave while they're still clapping. Back home, the wine flows. Your house becomes a temple of celebration. Guests flood in, still buzzing from the spectacle. You don't speak of it, you let them do the talking. Your name dances through the marble halls like incense smoke. Later that night, a messenger arrives. A senator wants to meet. Another invites you to co-sponsor a temple restoration. An artist sends a bust of you. Slightly too flattering. You display it anyway. Power isn't just coin, it's attention. You've captured it. And Rome? Rome is yours tonight. You don't sleep much after the games. Not from nerves. Those are for senators and singers, but from something subtler. A hum under your skin. The buzz of relevance. You've spent a day weaving your name into Rome's pulse. And now that beat echoes in your veins. The next morning, your villa smells like spilled wine, trampled petals, and faintly of roasted dormice, leftovers from last night's post-spectacle feast. You step over a passed-out poet in your atrium. He's clutching a half-written ode titled, "To the One Who Dares Gladiators," and head into your solar. Because today is about something even more intoxicating than blood sport: real estate. Land, you see, is the true opium of the elite. Gold can be stolen, statues can crumble, even your reputation, sparkling as it is, can sour in a single scandal. But a villa perched above the Bay of Naples? That outlasts empires. You sip spiced wine while a steward reads you the day's proposals. A vineyard in Tuscia, an orchard in Sicily, but you wave them off. You already own vineyards, and Sicily's nice, but humid. No, today you've got your eye on something coastal, scenic, and completely unnecessary. Enter the Campanian coast, land of luxury, leisure, and layered social games. You've already sent a scout ahead, well, a freedman with a good nose and a suspiciously expensive taste in floor mosaics. He reports that a seaside villa once owned by a disgraced praetor is going to auction. The praetor fell from grace after an affair involving a Vestal virgin and a very confused flamingo. The villa's now considered tainted, which is perfect. Discount luxury is your favorite genre. You assemble a small party to ride south. No caravan this time, just you, a poet for amusement, a doctor, you never trust Campanian water, and a handful of guards disguised as polite attendants. Because you could be robbed. But more importantly, you could be seen being robbed. And that simply won't do. The ride is long, the Appian Way smooth and smug beneath your horse's hooves. You pass graves and mausoleums of lesser nobles trying to keep their names relevant. One has a statue of himself holding scrolls he clearly never read. Your poet scoffs. You approve. As you enter Campania, the air shifts, lighter, lazier, almost syrupy with sea breeze. You stop for the night in a villa belonging to a friend who isn't currently using it, or doesn't know you borrowed it. There, in a garden of cypress and myrtle, you sit beneath a pergola draped in vines and listen to the locals gossip about the villa you want. They say it's cursed. They say the last owner used it for necromancy, or orgies, or both. They say the dolphins in the nearby bay swim in strange circles when the moon is full. You smile and say, "I'll take two." Historians still argue whether Roman elites believed in these superstitions or just pretended to in order to gossip politely. You believe in whatever gets people talking about you. The next morning, you arrive at the property. And, by Bacchus, it's magnificent. Columns line the sea-facing side. The atrium opens directly to the sound of waves. There's a private pier, a fish pond carved with a mosaic of Neptune riding a hippocamp, and an upper terrace designed for dramatic brooding. Inside, the villa shows its age, but with charm. The walls are flaking frescoes of Bacchic revelry. One room has a faded inscription that reads, "Don't trust the cook." You laugh. Then you check the kitchen staff's credentials. You walk through the rooms slowly, not just assessing, but envisioning. That alcove could be a private library. That inner court, a garden with night-blooming jasmine. That back chamber, a domed observatory for stargazing or suspiciously timed omens. The estate manager, bald, nervous, smelling faintly of resin, trails behind you, muttering about renovations and drainage. You nod absently and tell him to summon the auctioneer. The bidding takes place in a villa nearby, one slightly less cursed. You arrive with your entourage draped in sea-colored linen. A clear message: I already belong here. Your main rival is a senator's nephew with an unfortunate mustache and a new money swagger. He bids confidently, flashing smiles. You bid without even blinking. He raises the price. You raise your eyebrow. He offers land rights. You offer a promise of a temple donation and toss in a sculpture of Venus made entirely from mother of pearl. He folds. You own it. Back at your new seaside palace. Celebrations begin. Musicians arrive from Naples. Local elite come bearing wine and attempts at witty conversation. You float through it all like a deity in retirement. By midnight, you're on the terrace alone, wrapped in a light cloak, sipping chilled rosewater. The bay sparkles below. Dolphins circle, possibly in worship, possibly confused. Either way, it's yours now. You spend the next week making the villa yours in ways both loud and subtle. You commission mosaics, one of Apollo riding a tiger, another of yourself as Hercules lounging with a wine cup. You order all the furniture replaced with Egyptian imports. You install a whispering gallery just because it sounds mysterious. You invite philosophers to debate beneath your olive trees, then interrupt them halfway through to ask whether dreams can be inherited. They pretend they already thought about that. You nod solemnly. You hold a mock naval battle in the bay. Tiny boats, hired actors. One drowns, very dramatically. Children cheer. The dolphins join in. By now, word of your acquisition has spread across Rome. Some call it excessive, others say it's brilliant. One senator sends a passive-aggressive poem about shoreline erosion. You send him a bronze crab with a scroll in its claw. Come visit. Tides in. Eventually, you must return to the city, but not without leaving a mark. Before departing, you commission a small shrine on the edge of your property. Nothing grand, just marble steps, an inscription dedicating it to Fortuna Seaside, patroness of elegant real estate deals. Locals are baffled. You're delighted. You've created a new tradition, which is what the elite do best: invent meaning, then sell it in marble. Back in Rome, your return is subtle, but only in the way a thunderstorm is subtle if you're standing indoors. You arrive with a sun-kissed glow, a new poet in tow, and several crates of Campanian wine. People want to know everything. What's the villa like? Was it really cursed? Did you tame the ghost of the praetor? You smile mysteriously. At dinner that night, someone asks why you needed another villa. You lean back, sip your wine, and say, "It wasn't about needing. It was about proving I still can." And just like that, the room laughs, someone toasts, and Rome remembers. You don't just collect wealth. You perform it. You're back in Rome, but part of you is still listening to the waves lapping beneath your terrace in Campania. Still, the city needs you. Well, it needs your name, your silk-clad presence, your ability to throw coin-shaped shade in a forum full of flatterers. So, you slip seamlessly back into your city skin, like a python returning to its favorite sun-warmed marble bench. Rome's buzzing with rumors, not just about your new seaside estate, but about a certain Villa Urbana, an urban mansion, said to be available for purchase just off the Palatine Hill. Yes, you already have one, two, in fact, but this one belonged to a man who once dined with Nero and survived. That alone makes it legendary. You're intrigued. You do love a property with stories attached, especially ones involving emperors and possibly a few discreet poisonings. So, before breakfast, you're already making plans to tour it, because real power doesn't wait for brunch. This time, the acquisition isn't about beaches or vacation. This is about presence. Every senator worth his salt has a foot on the Palatine, but this villa sits closer to the Temple of Apollo than most people dare to whisper. If you own this place, you don't just exist in Rome, you loom over it. You arrive unannounced, but your presence precedes you. The caretakers scramble. A young steward drops a tray of dates. You give him a smile that could either be kindness or threat, and move on. The villa is, in a word, exhausted. Its walls are painted with faded triumphs. Its marble floors are cracked with memory. A statue of Minerva in the atrium has one chipped eye and a suspicious tilt. Still, the bones are good. The light falls in all the right ways. And the view? The view is history folding itself into your lap like a well-trained cat. You walk through room after room, imagining not just renovations, but reimaginings. That side chamber? A writing studio with scrolls arranged by genre and gossip potential. That crumbling garden? Reborn as a sanctuary of pomegranate trees and imported peacocks. Historians still argue whether elite Romans truly needed multiple villas, or whether it was all just performative politics with a touch of competitive architecture. You don't argue, you just buy. Negotiations are swift. You offer triple what it's worth. Not because you have to, because you can. The seller doesn't even blink. The transaction happens so quickly. The ink is barely dry before you're ordering statues removed and paintings retouched. You move in before the dust settles. First order of business: transformation. You bring in your preferred architect, a Greek with an ego the size of the Forum and a fondness for coffered ceilings. He claps his hands when he sees the atrium. "Ah," he says, "she's not dead, she's sleeping." You approve the metaphor. Then the budget. You bring in mosaic artists from Alexandria. They work barefoot, humming lullabies as they piece together scenes of Dionysian revels and imaginary beasts. One hallway becomes a corridor of night, the tiles designed to shimmer like stars when the oil lamps are lit. You commission murals, but not the usual gods and laurels. No, you want something bold. One wall depicts a satyr whispering secrets to a bored-looking emperor. Another shows a lion wearing a laurel crown. Symbolism? Obviously, but also just a bit of elite-level trolling. And then there's the ceiling. You decide it should move. No one's done that before. At least not sober. But you remember Nero's famous revolving dining room. Whether it existed or not is up for debate, but the idea of it is delicious. So you commission your own version. A ceiling in your triclinium that opens slowly to reveal the sky. It doesn't rotate, but it glides apart like stage curtains. The first time it's tested, petals fall from the gap. Unplanned. A nice touch. You pretend it was your idea. By now, your villa is making people very nervous. Not because it's too opulent, but because it's too clever. Every fresco seems to mock someone. Every mosaic has a double meaning. One marble bust in your vestibule is actually a senator you despise. Re-sculpted just enough to dodge lawsuits. People come to dine, not to eat, but to interpret. At one dinner, a guest asks whether the peacocks in your garden are meant to symbolize pride or surveillance. You shrug. Depends on what you've done. Evenings at your Palatine villa become the hottest ticket in Rome. Not for the food, though your Syrian chef does wonders with honey and lamb, but for the company. The games. The unpredictable flourishes. You start hosting convivia, elite dinner parties with themes that range from the divine, "Tonight we dine as if we are gods," to the absurd, "Tonight everyone must speak in iambic hexameter." At one gathering, you hire actors to stage a surprise argument between Mars and Venus, ending in a staged thunderclap and a ceiling downpour of rose petals. Some guests swoon. One sneezes uncontrollably. Art isn't always gentle. You've also built a tiny private theater in your villa's back corner. Not big, just 30 seats, cushioned, exclusive. You hire playwrights to perform one-act comedies inspired by real Senate scandals. The elite laugh nervously, then louder, then too loudly. Eventually, you begin hosting symposiums, not just the kind where everyone drinks until their sandals come off, but actual philosophical debates, Stoics, Epicureans, and people who just like to hear themselves talk all crowd around your couches. You moderate with wine in hand and questions like, if we live to please the gods, should they leave Yelp reviews? These events get written about, first in whispers, then in little verse snippets passed from party to party. Your villa becomes a canvas not just of marble and mosaic, but of myth. You are no longer a person. You are an idea, a lifestyle, a living puzzle people can't quite solve. And that suits you perfectly. You don't sleep in the same bedroom twice. Each is decorated differently. One has black walls and mirrors. One is gold-leafed from floor to ceiling. One smells perpetually of cinnamon, for reasons even your staff can't explain. Even your bathhouse is a performance. The caldarium is designed like a miniature grotto. Steam curls through carved mouths of stone dolphins. You bathe in water laced with lavender and mint. The floor is heated. The marble bench outside the door is the perfect temperature for fainting dramatically. Should the need arise, one day, a rival senator visits and says, "I didn't know this villa had such ambitions." You smile and offer him wine. She wants to be worshipped. You say, running a hand along a newly sculpted wall relief of the Muses, "And I intend to let her." There's a sense among your peers that you've crossed into something new. You're not just rich, you're inevitable. Even the emperor sends a messenger. Just a note, no words. Just a drawing of a laurel and a fox. No one quite knows what it means, but it smells faintly of cinnamon. You leave it displayed in your vestibule. Because of course you do. Your villa on the Palatine is fully awake now. No longer a relic with peeling gods on the walls, but a living character in Rome's grand drama, somewhere between a temple, a salon, and a tasteful trap for the vain and powerful. You've sculpted every chamber into a mirror of your wit, your mystery, and your slightly alarming attention to aesthetic detail. But the real power of a Roman elite isn't just in owning such a palace. It's in what you do with it. And what you do is host. Not just dinners, not just debates. You host everything. And you host like your ancestors hosted the gods, lavishly, with a flair for the theatrical and a schedule that makes the Saturnalia look like a polite brunch. Today, you're preparing for a convivium that's been whispered about for weeks. Guests are arriving from the far edges of the empire, generals, authors, mistresses of authors pretending to be poets themselves, and that one philosopher from Athens who only eats olives and writes down everything everyone says. The theme? A night among the deities. Everyone must arrive dressed as a god, complete with mythological backstory, costume, and one divine boast. One guest comes as Jupiter, with a sculpted eagle on his shoulder and a history of infidelity almost too on the nose. Another is Neptune, trailed by 3 perfumed servants fanning him with fish-shaped fans. One woman, brilliant, terrifying, appears as Nemesis and just glares at everyone. You make a note not to seat her near anyone you owe money. And you glide in as Mercury, silver-hemmed robes, winged sandals custom made by a Greek artisan who now insists on being paid in sapphires. You wear a wreath of laurels tipped in crushed glass that sparkles like the sky. You don't say much. You don't need to. The atrium has been transformed. Oil lamps flicker along mirrored columns. Musicians play hidden behind fig trees. Servers drift like ghosts with platters of dates, peacock tongues, and candied violets. The air smells of citrus and ambition. This is no ordinary dinner. You've devised an elaborate table layout, a crescent of couches surrounding a central platform where, at random intervals, actors will reenact divine arguments. At one point, Apollo storms out because Dionysus calls his lyre playing sentimental. 10 guests applaud, 2 faint, 1 takes notes for a future comedy. Throughout the evening, there are games. You've arranged a mock trial of the gods, where each guest must defend their deity's relevance. Mars says he's vital because Rome must always be ready for war. Minerva lectures everyone. Bacchus accidentally wins the crowd by getting them drunk enough to forget the point. Even your staff is in character. Your steward, a man who normally speaks 3 words a day, now struts through the courtyard in a toga embroidered with thunderbolts, calling himself Jupiter's accountant. A fringe tidbit? At one point in actual Roman history, a wealthy freedman named Trimalchio hosted a dinner party so elaborate it involved mechanical birds, courses announced by trumpet, and dishes shaped like the zodiac. Yours might be even more absurd, but you've added better lighting. Historians still argue whether these themed banquets were expressions of sincere piety or just excuses to show off. You say, why not both? A little reverence, a lot of revelry, and a whole heap of creative social chess. Because every seat at your table is a signal. Who reclines beside whom? Who pours the first wine? Who makes the joke that everyone laughs at too loudly? Tonight isn't about food, it's about positioning. Power draped in garlands. At one point, the evening shifts. The laughter turns quieter, the wine deeper. Someone begins reciting love poetry. Another begins to weep, possibly from art, possibly from indigestion. You rise, not to speak, but to gesture, and the ceiling glides open. The stars peer in like nosy neighbors. A soft wind moves through the room, scented with myrrh and pine. Silence follows. It's perfect. You let it linger. The next morning, Rome talks of nothing else. Who was seated next to whom? What your mural of Mercury whispering to a sphinx might mean. Whether you were hinting at divine lineage or just poking fun at the Senate. You don't confirm or deny. Instead, you begin preparing your next event. This one? The Night of 100 Lamps. A twilight banquet held entirely by lamplight, with shadows carefully arranged to resemble the outlines of famous scandals. Guests will eat in rooms lit only by shifting flame, and every course will arrive from behind veils. Is that honey roasted duck or a clever fig illusion? No one will know until they taste. But hosting isn't just about banquets. There are smaller gatherings. 2. Intimate salons in your reading room, where guests recline on purple cushions and debate the best line from Ovid or whether Julius Caesar's haircut was a political choice. It was. You've also begun hosting secret midnight suppers in your peristyle garden, candles floating in the fountain. Soft lyre music, conversation low enough to disguise real truths as metaphors. These invite-only events are rumored to include senators, spies, and the occasional Vestal virgin in disguise. One evening, a rival noble tries to outdo you. He invites half the Senate to a rooftop feast featuring trained monkeys that serve wine. The monkeys misbehave. One steals a wig, another relieves itself in the soup. The incident is immortalized in a short play called The Fall of House Ridiculum, which debuts 3 days later, in your private theater. The rivalry ends there, and yet, for all your public displays, you keep some things hidden. A secret garden inside your villa, walled off from every other room, accessible only through a rotating bust of Cicero that triggers a hidden latch. Inside, complete silence, save for wind and water, statues of gods without names, plants chosen for their scent and shadow. Here, you retreat when even your own brilliance becomes a bit too bright. No one knows about this room but your steward, who swears on his third-born's life never to speak of it. From this place of peace, you plan your final grand hosting gesture of the season. A living pantheon. You commission living statues, beautiful performers painted in gold and silver to pose as the gods themselves. They'll stand perfectly still throughout the banquet, only moving once to deliver a single prophecy to each guest. The prophecies, of course, are tailored by your spies to unsettle, amuse, or enlighten. Yours is whispered by a silver Diana. You will dine with the dead before you dance with the divine. You smile. You wrote that line yourself. By the end of the evening, 2 senators have proposed marriage. One guest confesses to a crime you never asked about, and someone leaves behind a scroll titled, The Cult of You. It's now being copied around the city. Hosting, in the hands of Rome's elite, is more than a social tool. It's architecture, it's theater, it's soft domination by candlelight. And you've turned it into an art form. You don't mean to become a tastemaker. You really don't. It just sort of happens. One day you're selecting new cushions dyed in Murex purple and the next, half the Palatine has reupholstered in the same shade, pretending they always loved that tone. You install a bronze fountain shaped like a satyr spitting wine into a basin. And within a month, 8 senators have variations, including one unfortunate copycat whose fountain makes a gagging sound. You try not to gloat too much, but at this point, you're not just wealthy, you are fashion. You are flavor. You are the whisper that turns into a trend before lunch. Naturally, your next playground becomes personal style, not just tunics and sandals. Anyone can wear silk. You begin to design your persona, one item at a time. Like a mosaic, each piece matters. You start with your fibulae, brooches used to pin your garments. Yours aren't just fasteners, they're art. One is a miniature chariot in gold, the wheels set with rubies. Another, a glass cameo that seems to shift expressions depending on how the light hits it. People notice. Of course they do. You begin arriving at events dressed like a walking riddle. One day in jet black robes stitched with silver stars. Another in tunics so sheer they whisper with every breeze. Someone accuses you of dressing like an oracle trapped in a dream. You thank them. A fringe tidbit. Some Roman elites wore rings on every finger, each one symbolic. Enchanted, or poisoned. You go further. Rings, bracelets, a neck torque stolen from a Gallic prince, and sandals custom dyed with a blend of saffron and crushed lilies. Historians still argue whether this obsession with fashion among Rome's elite was about status or insecurity. You suspect it's both, but mostly performance. And you're directing a wardrobe epic that would put most stage plays to shame. Soon, Rome watches to see what you wear before deciding what's acceptable. Togas trimmed in amethyst? Daring. Translucent linen with scenes from the Aeneid embroidered across the hem? Bold. You once wear a cloak fastened with a pin shaped like a sleeping dog. 3 days later, people are naming dogs after you. But style is just the first layer. Let's talk scent. You work with a Syrian perfumer who claims he once anointed Cleopatra's boat sails. He didn't. but he tells the story well. Together, you craft a signature fragrance, a blend of myrrh, cinnamon, saffron, and one secret ingredient he won't even name to his wife. You scent your scrolls, your walls, even your wine cups. You leave a trail of divinity behind you. People recognize your presence before they see your face. At the theater, people whisper, "They're here," and suddenly everyone's posture improves. And oh, the theater. You make an entrance like it's sport. Arriving fashionably late is passé. You arrive precisely at the moment the drama reaches its emotional peak. Cloak trailing, entourage silent, sometimes you wear a mask. Purely for intrigue. One time you applaud too soon, on purpose. It sends the actors into a minor crisis, the audience into speculation, and your reputation into the clouds. You patronize artists, yes, but not just the sculptors and poets. You support eccentrics, a man who paints with wine, a woman who writes tragedies performed entirely by trained birds, a dancer who never speaks, only hums. They all claim you've changed their lives. You just hand them coins and nod like a benign storm cloud. Your home becomes an unofficial museum. People stop by just to glimpse the new portrait made entirely of crushed gemstone dust, or to study the gold leaf map of the underworld you had embedded in your floor. You have a room, just one, devoted entirely to mirrors. Polished bronze, silver-backed glass from Alexandria, obsidian slabs that reflect shadows more than faces. People walk through it and come out different, or at least they pretend to. This level of flamboyant self-expression doesn't come without consequences. Some say you're too decadent, that your wealth could feed 3 cities for a year. Others say you're a genius, a visionary, a mad muse. The truth doesn't matter. What matters is that they say it. Your fashion choices begin to bleed into politics. One senator tries to imitate your style. He starts wearing a pearl-draped tunic and a ring shaped like a fish swallowing a gem. People laugh, not because it's strange, but because you wore it first. And better. Eventually, a younger noble attempts a coup of taste. He hosts a party where everyone must dress as animals from conquered provinces. It's chaotic. Someone arrives as a Parthian goat, another as a Numidian giraffe. The smell of feathers lingers for days. You attend in a simple white toga. No jewelry, no scent, and still, you outshine them all. Less, it turns out, as devastatingly more, when timed correctly. Now, the most sought-after accessory in Rome becomes your approval. People send you gifts, experimental fabrics, scented ink, a tunic that hums softly when walked in. You donate it to a temple. It was awful. But don't get too smug. Well, do, but tastefully. Because being a trendsetter means constant reinvention. What's divine today becomes yesterday's wine-stained toga. So you evolve. You incorporate foreign elements. A scarf woven from Chinese silk. Bangles from Mauritania. Sandals carved with Sanskrit blessings. You host a fashion of the world gathering, where each guest must arrive dressed in the style of a different province. It's enlightening, and chaotic. That night, you wear nothing but a belt of ivory tablets listing your favorite poetic lines. People faint. You also begin experimenting with masks. Not just for parties, but for mood. A silver half mask for sorrow. A golden bird beak for levity. A porcelain blank face for when you don't feel like being anyone at all. The masks become legend. People start imitating them. Badly. At this point, rumors swirl. Some say you've created a secret society dedicated to beauty and wit. Others claim you sleep on a bed of dyed rose petals. One bold story insists you've had your reflection removed from all water sources so as not to be haunted by your own vanity. All false. Mostly. And what does the emperor think of all this? Surprisingly little. He watches from afar, amused or slightly threatened. It's hard to tell. But he does send you a robe one day. Purple, subtly embroidered with stars. You wear it only once. At dawn. On a terrace. Alone. Because sometimes, even gods need to breathe. So, how does Rome's most iconic elite spend their infinite wealth? By shaping not just their world, but the world. By making others feel that every gesture, every earring, every sandal strap means something. You don't wear wealth. You perform it. You curate it. You stretch it across the fabric of your identity until people can't tell where the style ends and you begin. And that, in Rome, is immortality. Word count 3.070. By now, your reputation in Rome is as untouchable as a Vestal Virgin's virtue, or, well, the idea of it. You've conquered fashion, hosting, architecture. You've blurred the line between mortal and myth so thoroughly. The line gave up and became a decorative border on your bath towels. But there's one final arena where the Roman elite must flaunt their infinite wealth. And that's leisure, not idle time, not laziness. No, leisure is warfare, as a subtle, high-gloss domination of time, bodies, and the concept of pleasure itself. You begin your conquest at the balnei, Rome's public bathhouses. But don't misunderstand. These aren't just steam and soap affairs. These are architectural poems to the human body. The elite don't go to the baths, they descend. Like demigods entering sacred waters. And you bathe like a deity on sabbatical. Your chosen bathhouse isn't just any old pile of columns and heat. It's a masterpiece. Heated floors, murals of sea nymphs so lifelike they seem to wink. Ivory benches, marble basins big enough to drown a small orchestra. One of your walls actually sings when the steam hits it right. You commissioned it yourself, from an eccentric Egyptian who only works on Tuesdays. You start with the apodyterium, the changing room. Your slaves undress you with practiced grace, folding your garments with the reverence usually reserved for relics. You wear a bathing tunic so thin it might qualify as a vapor. Your sandals are scented. You step onto mosaic floors chilled just enough to wake your feet. And already 3 senators pretend they came just to bump into you. The tepidarium, warm room, is your mingling zone. You lie on a marble bench, lightly oiled, listening to philosophers debate whether the soul has weight or whether Cicero had good handwriting. Someone nearby is quoting Virgil. Someone else is peeling a fig in an unnecessarily sensual manner. A mainstream historical fact? Many Roman bathhouses included libraries and lecture halls. That's right, you could get a facial, debate stoicism, and borrow a scroll on aqueduct engineering, all before lunch. But the real magic happens in the caldarium, the hot room. The steam curls like gossip. The air turns thick, and people begin to reveal more than skin. In this room, secrets are softened like wax. Political plots, whispered alliances, the names of lovers, all shared between sweat and sighs. You don't speak much here. You don't have to. Your presence radiates. You make eye contact, tilt your head slightly, and entire conversations occur without words. It's exhausting, but effective. And then, when the heat becomes too much, you slip into the frigidarium, a cold plunge that snatches your breath and resets your soul. You emerge like Venus from the foam, dripping influence. Someone applauds, possibly ironically, doesn't matter. Once dry, oiled, and loosely red raped in a post-bath robe dyed the color of storm clouds. You head to the massage chamber. Your personal masseur is a former Thracian wrestler who now channels all that energy into your shoulders. He says nothing. You love him. Of course. No bathhouse experience is complete without the snack spread. Pickled things, honeyed things, little crunchy fried things. You nibble a date stuffed with cheese and regret nothing. But you aren't limited to the public baths. No. You've created your own private retreat, a balnea inside your villa. It features a ceiling painted with stars that shift positions seasonally. The water flows through silver-piped channels, infused with herbs depending on your mood. Lavender when you're wistful, bay and pine when you're ambitious. Once, after a particularly insulting poem was circulated about you, you bathed in wine. True story. Roman elites believed wine baths could rejuvenate the skin. You don't know if that's true, but it definitely dyed your legs a lovely shade of melancholy. And then there are the country villas. Your estate in the Campanian hills overlooks the sea like it's judging it. The villa is designed for leisure of the highest order. Terraced gardens with whispering grass, statues that double as fountains, a fish pond with trained eels that respond to claps. They're terrible at it, but charming. You spend your mornings reciting bad poetry to your parrot. Your afternoons are for naps under a fig tree, attended by servants trained to fan you without rhythm. Rhythm disturbs your dreams. Your evenings? Wine tastings led by a Gaul who insists he can taste history in a sip. A fringe tidbit. Roman elites often imported snow from the mountains to chill their drinks in summer. You take it further. You store the snow in an underground vault shaped like a sleeping lion. Your steward insists it keeps better that way. You don't argue. He's terrifying. Of course, leisure isn't always passive. You host private athletic games. Not vulgar gladiatorial stuff, please. Yours are refined. Wrestling, discus, poetry under duress competitions. One involves racing across the garden while balancing a bowl of olive oil. The winner gets a handmade laurel crown and bragging rights until sunset. You also take up hunting, or the aristocratic version of it. You ride out in embroidered leather, accompanied by falcons and servants who scare the animals into your path. You release an arrow, casually. Later, everyone applauds the hare you, skillfully, bagged. The meat is never eaten. It's pickled and placed on display with a plaque, caught during a moment of thought. Historians still argue whether these leisure activities were actual rest or elaborate performances of status. You shrug. Why not both? Even your naps are choreographed. Your reading room is another sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling scroll racks. A glass ceiling to let in moonlight. A sofa designed for perfect reclining posture. You've hired a young man whose entire job is to read you dramatic literature in a whisper while you pretend not to cry. At some point, you begin receiving visitors who ask only to observe your lifestyle. They treat your existence like an exhibit. You offer them fruit. They write essays. One foreign dignitary leaves stunned after a single afternoon. He claims you've invented a new form of time. He wasn't wrong. Eventually, you decide to build a floating villa, a barge on the Tiber, complete with dining salon, bathing chamber, and a stage for impromptu musical performances. You drift through Rome at sunset. Flute music echoing across the water. People on the banks pause. Mouths open. You wave, slowly. And then there are the dream chambers. Oh yes, these are your masterpiece. Special rooms in your villa designed to enhance sleep and dreams. Walls painted in deep blues. Ceiling constellations that match the actual sky. Pillows stuffed with rose petals and goose down. A gentle perfume wafting from bronze censers. You lie there at night, half drunk on pleasure and philosophy, and float into sleep like slipping through silk. Sometimes, you dream of Rome underwater. The statues sprouting coral, your name etched into every broken column. Sometimes you dream of nothing, which is perfect, too, because when you have everything, even dreaming becomes an art worth curating. And by now, you understand the ultimate truth of Roman leisure. It's not about rest. It's about power disguised as ease. It's the ability to make time obey you. To live in a way that turns heads. Not from noise or conquest, but from stillness. Curated, oiled, perfumed stillness. You have become leisure incarnate. And Rome? Rome now schedules itself around your naps. It starts with a whisper. Like so many things in Rome do. Not a threat, not a rumor. Just a gentle suggestion that maybe, perhaps, you could spend a little more time in the countryside. And suddenly, you're the proud, or resigned, owner of a latifundium. A sprawling agricultural estate that stretches so wide you joke it has weather zones. It's not glamorous in the way your scented villas and floating dining halls are. But it's power, real power, the kind that feeds cities and builds fortunes slowly, stubbornly, in the soil. You arrive by litter, your entourage trailing like a living train. Peacocks shriek in the olive groves. The steward bows so low you wonder if he'll ever stand upright again. This land, this vast quilt of vines, grains, sheep, and possibility, is yours now. You are no longer just elite. You are a landowner, the backbone of Rome's senatorial class. Congratulations, you've entered the world of passive income with muddy feet. Running an estate isn't glamorous, but you make it so. You don't just own fields. You design experiences. Your vineyards are laid out like constellations. Your olive trees are pruned to look like stoic philosophers. The barn has a mural of Ceres herself blessing your granary. A little on the nose? Maybe, but tasteful. Every morning, you recline on your shaded veranda with a goblet of diluted wine. Don't worry. It's infused with rosemary and crushed date for flair, and watch the gears turn. Slaves harvest figs under a chirping sky. Freedmen oversee wheat threshing. Your Greek accountant mutters to himself while updating the ledgers on imported papyrus. A woman from Hispania who once taught rhetoric now manages your stable. You employ an entire ecosystem. each cog polished and paid or punished to keep your empire humming. Mainstream historical fact: by the late Republic, many Roman elites derived their wealth from massive rural estates run by enslaved labor. Owning land wasn't just profitable, it was expected. So naturally, you exceed expectations. You don't just grow grain. You experiment. You cultivate saffron. You try your hand at silkworms. You build a fish pond so elaborate it has a floodgate and tide timer. One of your tenants swears he saw a dolphin. Historians still argue whether Roman fish ponds were a practical food source or just status symbols with scales. Yours is both. You host dinner parties around it, where guests catch their own mullet with golden nets. Let's not ignore the villa itself. It's rustic, but in the deliberate, wildly expensive sense. Frescoes of pastoral scenes, a fireplace designed to mimic a mountain spring. You install a poet in residence. His job is to narrate your walks through the orchards in heroic verse. Your villa has wings, one for summer, one for winter. The summer wing has cool stone floors, sea-facing porticos, and jasmine-scented fans. The winter side, heavy tapestries, heated walls, and a caldarium built snugly inside like a hot stone hug. Naturally, you don't work the land yourself, don't be absurd, but you oversee. With flourish, you introduce crop rotation, you name your sheep, you write a guide to rural etiquette that no one asked for but everyone copies. Your steward begs you not to hold another competition to name your new plow oxen. Ozymandias wins, narrowly beating out Brutus the Moo. A fringe tidbit: some Romans believed singing to vines improved their yield. So you hire a small choir to serenade your grapes. It becomes a local curiosity. People visit just to listen. Someone composes an ode to your wine. It's terrible. You frame it. Your neighbors, other landowning elites, start getting competitive. One hosts a harvest festival with live music and fireworks. Another commissions a statue of Jupiter vomiting grain. You top them all by organizing a Feast of the First Olive, featuring an interpretive dance representing oil production from pit to amphora. The dancers are mostly nude. The oil is not extra virgin by the end. Rome, of course, still pulls at you, but life on the latifundium offers a different kind of richness. You begin to appreciate the rhythm: planting, growing, harvesting, fermenting. You watch storms roll in and know exactly how much wheat you'll lose. You smell the soil and predict the peach crop. You're not just managing wealth, you're rooted in it. You start experimenting with rural governance. You appoint village leaders. You sponsor a small shrine. You host tribunals on your porch, wearing a wreath of barley and pretending to be just. Peasants come to plead. Some thank you. One writes a love poem to your water system. You blush. And then, there's the estate retreat, a weekend getaway within your own domain. You build a miniature shrine complex in a wooded grove, a place to commune with the gods, the muses, or just your own fabulous reflection in a sacred spring. There, you bathe in water cooled by ceramic pipes, dine on wild boar glazed with honey, and listen to flutes while watching fireflies. You host a poetry contest judged by owls. You swear one winked at the worst entry. You've turned rustic living into an elite art form. Still, the countryside has its challenges. A flood ruins your barley fields. A fire takes part of the south wing, your guest rooms for lesser poets. Bandits steal a shipment of garlic. You let them keep it. It was overcured anyway. But you adapt. You rebuild. You reinvest. You install a lightning rod designed by an Egyptian mystic and pretend it's practical. You throw a festival to appease the spirits of the scorched grove. You name a new wine blend Phoenix Ash 23. It becomes wildly popular. Eventually, the land stops being a backdrop. It becomes a character, a collaborator. You no longer simply own it, you correspond with it. You notice the taste of different hillsides, the way shade moves across your kitchen garden, the tone shift in local gossip before a storm. And your estate begins to produce more than food and wool. It produces reputation. People in Rome speak of your olives like they're relics. Your wheat ends up in imperial bakeries. A senator boasts that your honey-cured ham brought tears to his wife's eyes. You don't correct him when he says you slaughter the pigs yourself by whispering lullabies. The Senate starts eyeing your methods. You're invited to give a speech about rural modernization. You arrive in boots stained with actual dirt. People applaud as if you just recited the 12 tables backwards. This is wealth in its most timeless form. Slow, immovable, organic. When cities fall, the land still yields. And you, its glorious steward? You smile, sun-warmed, grape-stained, crowned with laurel and mosquito bites, knowing that your empire stretches not with legions but with seeds. Because Rome may be made of marble, but your fortune? It grows leaf by leaf. You awake not to the crow of a rooster but to the soft shuffle of a servant carrying in your morning readings a roll of recent Senate decrees, a scroll of Homeric verse, and a few amusingly vicious poems about your political rivals. Breakfast is pears poached in honey, eaten reclined, of course, under a pergola dripping with vines trained into the shape of philosophical symbols. You are not merely wealthy now. You are cultured. You are a connoisseur of thought, a patron of minds, and in this empire of marbles and olives, you wield influence not just through gold, land, or lineage, but through ideas. Welcome to your life as a Roman patron of the arts. It starts small, a young poet, nervous, half-starved, clearly allergic to daylight, reads you a few lines in exchange for bread and shade. You laugh, toss him a coin, and invite him back. Soon, he's living in your guest wing, writing epigrams that somehow always mention your generosity, your wisdom, and your unexpectedly symmetrical nose. This, you realize, is delightful, so you expand. You gather a little court of creatives, poets, sculptors, architects who speak in metaphors and can't manage their finances, musicians who claim they can hear the music of the stars. They orbit you like aesthetically tortured moons. And you adore it. A mainstream historical fact? Many of Rome's most enduring literary works, including those of Horace and Virgil, were composed under elite patronage. Their masterpieces were funded by powerful nobles who often had very specific requests. And oh, do you have requests? You sponsor an epic poem about your life, told entirely through the perspective of your toga. You commission a mural of your favorite philosophical debate, whether the soul can be sweetened by wine. You pay an actor to reenact your most glorious Senate speech using puppets. Everyone weeps. Of course, this isn't all just ego stroking. Well, mostly it is. But there's also a certain noblesse oblige to it all. Rome thrives on stories, on beauty, on cultivated minds whispering truth from behind the curtain. And you are the curtain's patron, stitching gold into every hem. Your salon becomes the place to be. Not a literal salon. No cutting of hair here. This is a gathering, an atmosphere. Tuesday evenings, philosophy under moonlight. Fridays, dramatic readings in the atrium, where acoustics are divine and nobody claps. They just sigh meaningfully. Sundays, the controversial dinner of discord, where guests debate ethical dilemmas while sampling 12 versions of pickled turnips. One artist sculpts your bust from beeswax. Another tries to distill your essence in a single flute solo. One slightly unstable playwright attempts a tragedy in which you are played by a sentient olive tree. It flops, but the attempt was valiant, and you fund his next endeavor, a satire about Senate snacking habits. A fringe tidbit. Elite patrons sometimes had literary slaves called grammatici, trained solely to write flattering verses or correspond on their behalf. You hire one, of course. You call him Muse number 4. He's actually quite sharp, and once wins you a legal case by composing a legal argument in dactylic hexameter. Your influence grows beyond the marble walls. You begin to fund public art. A statue in the forum, not of yourself, too obvious, but of the ideal citizen, who just happens to have your jawline. A mural at the baths depicting the muses weeping over your absence. A public library wing with scrolls donated in your name, even if you never quite finished them. Historians still argue whether Roman patronage was about cultural elevation or blatant propaganda. Honestly, you don't see the difference. There's power in shaping taste, in deciding what's beautiful, what's moral, what's worth remembering. You become a tastemaker, an aesthetic oracle. Senators ask for your opinion before they buy sandals. Young poets add extra enjambment just because you once said it felt mysteriously decadent. You begin to receive dedications. Scrolls wrapped in silk, addressed to the paragon of generosity and judicious pomegranate use. Odes comparing you to Jupiter, Apollo, even Minerva, awkward, since she's a goddess, but you let it slide. A comedic play based on your household pets wins an award. You cry, quietly, into your lavender-scented handkerchief. Then there are the rival patrons. Oh yes, Lucius Maximus, that smug fish sauce magnate, tries to outshine you by hosting a month-long festival of mime plays. Mime plays. You respond with a midnight poetry regatta, scrolls dropped from boats as part of an interpretive water ballet. He tries to build a statue so large it requires its own hill. You counter with a performance piece where a silent actor stands in the forum for 3 days holding a mirror to the sun. It burns holes into popular opinion. Eventually, you host your magnum opus, The Night of 1,000 Lamps. An evening of poetry, music, and dance in your garden, lit by oil lamps floating on ponds, suspended from trees, and arranged in constellations overhead. People speak of it for years. One senator swears he glimpsed the soul of Rome in a reflection off your wine cup. A younger you might have mocked such displays. But now you understand. Art and wealth are two sides of the same coin. One buys the other sanctifies the one. You build a temple, not to a god, but to memory, a modest shrine where your favorite artists' works are preserved in wax, clay, and ink. Tourists come, scholars study, lovers kiss under the marble inscription, funded by one who dreamed too much. Even the emperor hears of you. One day, a scroll arrives sealed in imperial purple, a request, a subtle compliment, a warning disguised as praise. He invites you to consult on a palace mural. You go, of course. You suggest something quiet, philosophical, symbolic. He chooses a scene of naval conquest instead. You nod. You are not emperor. But back home, in your library turned art studio, a group of ragged geniuses raise their cups to you. To the patron, they say, who sees the beauty in unfinished things? Because you do. You fund a blind sculptor who carves entirely by touch. A playwright who writes comedies in elegiac couplets just to see if he can. A painter who paints only with crushed flower petals. Their work might never survive. But that's not the point. You are the soil they grow in. Evenings, you walk among your collected treasures. Scrolls and statues, sketches and fragments, all humming with the fingerprints of grateful brilliance. You light a candle. You sit, and sometimes, alone, you write, not for publication, just for the pleasure of crafting a sentence so perfect it curls like incense in your mind. Lingers, and fades. Your sandals click softly on the marble floor as you pass under a coffered ceiling painted with the constellations of your birth month. 2 guards snap to attention. A scribe scuttles behind you like a well-trained crab. You aren't late, you're never late, but you do enjoy arriving last. Just as the room hushes. Just as all heads turn. Power, after all, is a performance. And today's venue? The Roman Senate. You are no mere spectator here. No idle aristocrat flanked by sycophants. You, with your wine-aged voice and opinionated eyebrows, are a senator. One of the sacred few who claim to hold the soul of the republic in their meticulously perfumed hands. Being a senator isn't just about togas and debates. It's a lifestyle, a never-ending theater of influence, where every nod, yawn, and, well, actually, can tip the balance of history, or at least delay lunch by an hour. You take your place on the curved benches. Gold rings glint. A whisper passes along the rows like wind through wheat. The consul of the day clears his throat. You pretend to listen, already composing your opening remarks in your head. Mainstream historical fact. Membership in the Roman Senate was limited to Rome's wealthiest elite, who were expected not only to govern but to maintain a certain moral and aesthetic standard. The toga wasn't optional, it was practically armor. You stand. The rustle of your toga, perfectly pleated this morning by your most anxious slave, seems to echo off the dome. Your voice cuts through the musty air like a crisp fig in a stale fruit bowl. You argue for infrastructure, of course. Bridges, aqueducts, public baths, things people can use and admire you for. You quote Virgil. You casually mention that your estate donated 12 barrels of olive oil to the starving provinces. You pretend to care about provincial grain prices while subtly mocking the governor of Sicily with a pun about lentils. It lands. The room chuckles. You win this round. But the Senate isn't always elegant sparring. Sometimes it's pure chaos. Men shouting, cloaks flapping. One elderly senator always falls asleep and snores louder than a gladiator. A minor fistfight breaks out near the curia door. You sip your watered wine and mutter, "Barbarians." Historians still argue whether the Senate wielded true power in the empire's later years or was mostly ceremonial. A marble stage for elite posturing. But you feel powerful, even when decrees are ignored or vetoed by the emperor. Your voice shapes the conversation. Your gossip seeds revolutions. You attend committees. Oh, the committees. Finance, public morality, censorship, the Aqueduct Oversight Subcommittee. You once sat through a 4-hour debate about the ethical implications of sewer drainage into a sacred stream. You doodled a minotaur fighting a tax collector in the margins of your wax tablet. Still, it's not just speeches and subclauses. Being a senator comes with perks. Prestige, invitations, the ability to wear a laticlave, a wide purple stripe down your toga that practically screams, "I make laws and ruin dinner parties." You dine with generals. You wine with philosophers. You once toasted an Egyptian priest with imported Persian nectar while discussing sewer reform. That's the kind of cultural whiplash only Rome provides. You also hold court, literally. As a senator, you preside over trials, not the messy ones with blood and screaming. No, you handle elite cases, property disputes, libel, accusations of improper statue placement. One noble sues another for calling his villa's atrium pedestrian. You rule in favor of the insult. Justice prevails. Fringe tidbit. Some senators took bribes not in money but in rare birds, exotic perfumes, or promises of future artistic dedications. You once received a live flamingo with a gold anklet. You named it objection. Senatorial life is a labyrinth of networking. You rise early, not to farm or pray, but to visit. The morning salutatio, when clients and hopefuls line up to pay their respects, is your daily theater. You nod graciously, distribute coins, listen to petitions. Some ask for legal help. Others want to marry your cousin. One just wants to smell your cologne. You host convivia, semi-formal dinners for your fellow senators. These are less about the food and more about maneuvering. Who sits where? Who compliments whom? Who mentions that certain provincial scandal just loud enough to be overheard? And sometimes, late at night, after the garum has settled and the wines made everything sparkle just a little, you lean back and reflect on how far you've come. You, once just another hopeful youth scribbling poetry and dodging chamber pots in the Sabura, now sip vintage Falernian in a room where history slouches on every cushioned bench. But Senate life has its dangers, too. You watch allies fall from favor. One misspeaks and ends up exiled. Another opposes a new tax and mysteriously retires to the countryside. You learn the art of elegant silence, the power of the non-committal grunt. You perfect the raised eyebrow that says, "Interesting, but not jail-worthy." You learn when to speak, and when to leave town entirely for a suspiciously timed vacation to Baiae. A young senator tries to rise too fast. He challenges a senior official in public. You attend his funeral a week later. You say nice things. You do not say, "Told you so," but you think it hard. Still, for every risk, there's reward. You are appointed censor for a year. You get to review the roles of citizens, revise the Senate list, and enforce public morals. You use your power judiciously, striking the name of a particularly annoying colleague and funding a public latrine in your own honor. It is spotless. You are proud. Later, you help pass a law limiting the number of ostrich feathers allowed in civic parades. It's silly, yes, but the people cheer. You feel oddly fulfilled. Power is strange like that. You sponsor a young orator, brilliant, brash, loud. He's your project. He wins his first case with a speech so fiery it singes the front row's eyebrows. You weep openly and pretend it's hay fever. Historians debate whether Rome's elite truly believed in civic duty or merely performed it for show. But in your case, the two are indistinguishable. You love the ritual, the pomp, the theater of responsibility. You write speeches that no one reads just because they sound beautiful. One day, you stand in the forum, arms outstretched, quoting from memory a lost law of the Republic. The crowd goes silent. A child asks his mother who you are. She whispers your name. You pretend not to hear. But you do. Back in the Curia, the debates go on. The scrolls keep multiplying. Someone proposes a tax on parasols. Someone else suggests that public statues should blink. You sigh. You write a motion to establish a committee for common sense. It passes unanimously. This is what it means to be powerful in Rome, not to rule, but to shape the rules. Not to command, but to whisper in the right ears. To draft the edicts, fund the libraries, and ensure that your name is always just slightly more prominent on the inscription. You are a senator. You legislate. You flatter. You endure. And when the empire trembles, you sip your wine, straighten your toga, and ask calmly, "Shall we adjourn?" The marble floor is warm beneath your feet as sunlight pours through the high lattice windows. You're not in the Forum today. Not in the Senate, either. Today, you are at your villa, your true sanctuary. And not just any villa. This is your countryside estate. Your pastoral paradise. The crown jewel of your lifestyle. Far from the noise of politics and the posturing of the city. Here, the air smells of laurel, fig, and money well spent. You step onto the colonnaded terrace, sipping chilled rosewater infused with mint. Olive trees sway lazily in the breeze. And below you, rows of grapevines stretch across the hills like green comb lines in the land's scalp. It's all yours, and no one important is looking for you until at least the Calends. The Roman elite didn't just live in Rome. After all, they fled from it, frequently, and with dramatic sighs, to the Villa Rustica when they wanted simplicity, and to the Villa Urbana when they wanted opulence disguised as simplicity. You've got both. Your rustic villa is technically a working farm. You've never harvested a thing in your life, of course. But you like to pretend. You dress in a faded tunic, pick exactly 3 olives, and say things like, "A fine yield this season," while your estate manager discreetly rolls his eyes. Then you retire to the bathhouse. A mainstream historical fact: Roman villas in the countryside often included full bath complexes, libraries, guest suites, and expansive dining rooms overlooking manicured landscapes. Yes, the countryside was rustic, if by rustic you mean gilded and fully staffed. You take your meals outside, reclined beneath a pergola draped in grapevines trained with mathematical precision. Dishes arrive in a gentle rhythm. Lentils with fennel, fresh bread with imported Spanish olive oil, flamingo tongue. Just kidding, that was last week. Guests arrive by litter, then stagger out into the garden, squinting at the sun like they've never seen it before. You offer them figs. You offer them wine. You offer them your absolutely unsolicited thoughts on the ethical dilemmas of aqueduct privatization. This is what Otium looks like: leisure with dignity. Not laziness. Not sloth. This is the refined Roman ideal of stepping away from the chaos of the city to reflect, philosophize, and enjoy the finer things while someone else tills the fields. The layout of your villa is perfect. Every window faces something beautiful. A blooming hedge, a sparkling fountain, a bust of Cicero looking mildly disapproving. You joke about moving him to face the kitchen, where his expression feels more appropriate. You even built a nymphaeum, a grotto dedicated to water nymphs. It's cool, shady, echoing with birdsong. Your guests love it. Your poet in residence once spent 3 hours in there composing a 4-line verse about your eyebrows. You keep animals, too. Exotic ones, naturally. Peacocks that strut like senators. A deer you claim once bowed to you. Chickens named after your rivals in the Senate. One lays eggs only when insulted. She's your favorite. Fringe tidbit: some Roman villas included elaborate fish ponds stocked with rare species. Not for eating, but simply to admire. You've got one. It's got carp that shimmer gold when startled. You spend an afternoon trying to startle them gently with haiku. When night falls, you host the kind of dinner party that would make a stoic blush. Low couches, soft music, dancers from the east who move like water. You lounge with a goblet of wine as a philosopher argues with a merchant about whether wealth corrupts the soul. You interject, only if it's not fermented properly, and everyone laughs. Because you're the one pouring the wine. Historians still argue whether the countryside retreats of Roman elites were truly escapes from public life or just extensions of their urban influence in prettier packaging. But from your terrace, listening to crickets and crickets alone, the answer feels obvious. You find time for reading, scrolls copied from the Alexandrian library, a few choice verses from Catullus, and that new treatise on dream interpretation. You're particularly taken with the chapter suggesting dreams of donkeys indicate an upcoming financial windfall. You dream of 2 donkeys. You buy more land. One afternoon, you decide to host a literary contest. Poets, historians, dramatists, anyone who can write and flatter, gather beneath the cypress trees. You read the submissions aloud. One is so bad your peacock hisses. Another is so good you ask the author to stay for the season. You name him your rural laureate and give him a tunic embroidered with metaphors. You practice archery, not because you need to, but because it looks good in the background of your guests' stories. You fire 3 arrows in a row, all vaguely in the direction of the target. You claim philosophical intention over precision. In your private study, octagonal, with floor mosaics depicting each of the 9 muses, you write. Nothing public, nothing dramatic, just reflections, notes to self, lines of verse you might turn into something someday. You even try a play once. It's terrible. You keep it anyway. The countryside changes you. You start noticing small things. The way light filters through cypress needles. The shape of clouds over the distant hills. The exact moment the evening breeze begins to carry rosemary and sheep. You have an entire argument with yourself about whether that's poetic or just unpleasant. You visit the local village occasionally, mostly to be seen, to offer charity, to hand out coins with a magnanimous smile. You become a legend there. The one with the golden fish pond. They whisper. The nobleman who quotes Plato when bargaining for cheese. You make peace with slowness. Back in Rome, everything is urgency. Here, time drips like honey. You learn to nap in 10-minute bursts under fig trees. You host symposiums where the main agenda is contemplate the horizon. You stop using clocks. You tell time by sun, shadow, and the mood of your parrot. But even here, politics finds you. A messenger arrives, breathless, scroll in hand. A senator's died. A seat is open. Names are being whispered. You sigh. You were just starting to perfect your grape-based vinegar recipe. You make plans to return to Rome, but not yet. Not today. One more day in your sanctuary. You stroll through your garden, where each flower bed is curated like a verse. Lavender and thyme, roses and violets, a hedge shaped like a philosophical question mark. A servant brings news. The latest harvest was abundant. You feign modest surprise. You knew it would be. You personally approved the astrological calendar used to time the planting. Tonight, you dine alone, not out of loneliness, but choice. A single candle, a bowl of olives, a loaf of warm bread. The sky overhead darkens to velvet. You listen to the sound of crickets and your own breathing. For a moment, it feels like you've outsmarted the entire empire. That's the real secret of wealth, isn't it? Not just gold, not just power, but space. Space to breathe, to think, to enjoy a slice of fresh fig and wonder if perhaps this is the closest anyone can come to happiness in this bewildering world. A donkey brays somewhere down the hill. You smile. Maybe 2 windfalls are on the way after all. You wake not to an alarm, but to birdsong. A chorus of larks and doves fluttering somewhere in the lemon trees outside your window. The light is soft, the linens cooler than the air. A slave gently opens the shutters, and the breeze floats in, scented with crushed herbs and distant bread. You're back in the city now, Rome, proper, and though the villa still lingers in your limbs like a pleasant ache. Today is a different kind of luxury. The curated, choreographed indulgence of your domus. Your urban palace nestled between ancient hills and ambitious neighbors. And oh, what a domus it is. Imagine this. Mosaic floors glittering with marine scenes, as if Neptune himself had designed your atrium. Marble columns veined with rose and ivory support ceilings painted to resemble open skies. Every surface gleams, every object speaks, even your door hinges squeak in perfect iambic rhythm, a feature you paid extra for. A mainstream historical fact, the elite Roman domus was more than a home. It was a statement, a public performance of wealth, taste, and lineage. Its layout, atrium, tablinum, peristyle, and so forth, was a physical embodiment of Roman social structure. You begin your day not in solitude but in display. The salutatio begins before your breakfast finishes steaming. A line of clients trails out your vestibule, each eager for a coin, a favor, or a glimpse of relevance. You descend the stairs, draped in a fresh toga, and pass through your atrium. Its impluvium, that shallow central pool designed to collect rainwater, is flanked by statues of ancestors whose noses are suspiciously identical to your own. Your steward announces names. You nod, murmur blessings, listen to requests. One man offers a sonnet in exchange for a small loan. Another begs to represent your interests in a lawsuit you didn't even know existed. You reward him anyway. He cries. You love this part. It's theater. You are Caesar in a domestic coliseum, tossing metaphorical bread to the plebs who cling to your coattails like so many hopeful barnacles. And then, finally, your house is yours again. You wander deeper into its cool heart, past chambers filled with treasures from every edge of the empire, ivory combs from India, pillows stuffed with goose feathers from Gaul, a bronze mirror polished enough to start fires with your charm alone. Your private study is a chaos of scrolls, wax tablets, and notes left by various poets who refuse to use bookmarks. A cat, technically the household's but emotionally yours, sleeps across the warm tiles, guarding your best quill like it's a sacred dagger. You sit, dictating letters to your secretary. Your voice is measured, your words chosen like spices. One letter praises a governor. Another gently reminds a debtor of his obligations. A third is simply a quote from Seneca followed by thoughts. Fringe tidbit. Elite Romans often employed liberti, former slaves, as secretaries, accountants, and estate managers. Their loyalty, bought with freedom, often ran deeper than blood. Your favorite, Felix, once impersonated you in court and won. After correspondence, it's time for pleasure. The baths await, not the public ones today. Those are for appearances. Today, you bathe in your balneum, a private sanctuary of warmth and vapor. The walls are tiled with scenes of ocean nymphs and sun chariots. The water is scented with myrrh. Your masseur, strong but silent, works eucalyptus oil into your shoulders as you plot how to get back at a senator who once said your lark pie was underseasoned. Next, lunch. You recline in the triclinium, flanked by two friends and one philosopher who never eats much but always critiques the olive oil. You serve dormice stuffed with nuts and herbs, then slices of melon chilled in snow packed from Apennine caves. A flautist plays softly from behind a screen. You pretend not to notice him struggling with allergies. You spend the early afternoon in your peristyle garden. It's a rectangle of calm, a rectangle that cost more than a legion's salary to design. Sculpted boxwood, singing fountains, a painted aviary filled with birds that sometimes swear in Greek. You read poetry aloud. You debate love. You nap beneath a laurel with your toga artfully crumpled, like a sleeping statue of ennui. Historians still argue whether these domus gardens were primarily for beauty, utility, or social signaling. Yours, of course, is all three. You grow roses and lettuce side by side to confuse visitors. Is it symbolic? One asks. You say yes, then change the subject. Late afternoon is for shopping, though you don't go yourself. Obviously, you send a slave with your ring and instructions. Saffron, silk, a new lyre string, and anything the Vestal virgins were seen wearing yesterday. They return with a selection so opulent it could bankrupt a Macedonian prince. You approve half of it and tip the messenger with a poem. There's a lull before dinner. You pace through your art gallery, also known as your hallway. Here, busts of famous thinkers line the walls. Aristotle, Cicero, that one sculptor who owed you money and paid in marble likenesses instead. You pause at your own bust. It's slightly idealized. You approve. Dinner is no simple affair. Tonight, you're hosting 15 of the most influential people you barely tolerate. The couches are arranged in a graceful crescent. The air is heavy with incense and opportunity. Courses arrive in waves. Oysters, boar, honey-drenched pears, a mysterious dish described only as Panther's Delight. You pretend to enjoy it. Entertainment includes a blind harpist, a juggler who only drops things when stared at directly, and a young boy trained to recite the Aeneid backward. You clap, you drink, you deliver an impromptu monologue about virtue that makes 3 guests cry and 1 request an early departure. By midnight, only the tenacious remain. You escort them to the vestibule with exaggerated warmth. Promises are made, scandals hinted, political alliances casually confirmed over after-dinner figs. You kiss cheeks. You wave. You close the door with the practiced elegance of a retiring god. Finally, quiet. You retreat to your sleeping quarters, where the walls are painted with stars and dreams. Your bed is vast, draped in Egyptian linen and guarded by 2 carved lions with eyes made of moonstone. A servant brings warm milk with nutmeg. Another mists the room with lavender. The cat, indifferent to your power, curls up beside you and purrs you into stillness. You drift off replaying the day, the applause, the gossip, the soft give of peacock feathers beneath your sandals. You are utterly, gloriously exhausted, not from labor, of course, but from maintaining the illusion that your life is effortless. This is the apex of Roman luxury. You are at the center of the city, the center of influence, the center of attention, and yet, tonight, in the soft cradle of your domus, you are alone with your breath and your dreams. Tomorrow, another performance. But for now, sleep. The empire can wait. The morning doesn't so much arrive as unfold. You don't open your eyes until the flute player in the atrium begins his gentle, meandering tune, the one you commission specifically for mornings when you feel vaguely philosophical but not quite caffeinated. It's a soft return to consciousness. Like silk sliding off a shoulder, you stretch beneath layers of linen finer than any moral fiber left in the Senate. Today's theme? Entertainment. Not the idle fiddling of peasants with dice or amateur musicians trying to impress wine-soaked crowds. No, you're immersed in the high art of curated spectacle. You don't consume amusement, you stage it, fund it, and, when the moment is right, become it. The day begins with your personal troupe of actors rehearsing in the courtyard. You've sponsored them for years. Though frankly, only 2 are any good, and one of those is losing his voice. The play is a comedy, plotting in tone, layered in double entendres that would make a Vestal drop her veil. You sip spiced date wine from a crystal goblet as they run their lines. Occasionally, you shout a suggestion, less shouting, more seduction, or, try dying with more dignity this time. Gaius, a slave discreetly brings you figs, cut and arranged like flower petals. You're deeply moved by the fruit, less so by the actors. A mainstream historical fact, wealthy Romans often financed entire theatrical productions. From the playwright's fees to the chorus's costumes. Some even kept full-time entertainers in their households, a permanent cast for an audience of 1. Later, your friend, frenemy, Marcus arrives. He's got a new auriga, a personal charioteer, and he won't stop talking about him. The calves of Apollo, I swear, he says. You nod politely while mentally composing a short satirical poem that references Marcus and losing control of his reins. He invites you to the races, and you can't decline. The Circus Maximus awaits. You arrive in style, litters, perfumes, and enough jewelry to blind the gods. Your entourage is precisely staggered, so that when you enter the imperial box, the sun glints off your brooch just right. The crowd roars, probably not for you, but you wave anyway. Chariot racing isn't just blood and sand. It's politics, class warfare, and ancient marketing. You're a loyal blue. Always have been. Always will be. The greens are a menace. The reds? Children. The whites? So last century. You cheer. You groan. You bet a small fortune. Casually, like dropping crumbs for a songbird. The auriga, Apollo calves, wins. You clap like a man who definitely didn't just lose enough to pave a new road. Marcus laughs too hard. You vow subtle revenge via birthday gift. Historians still argue whether the extreme popularity of the chariot races represented a genuine passion among the masses or a state-engineered distraction to maintain civic control. From your seat, basking in the fragrance of imported sandalwood and victory wine, you frankly couldn't care less. Back home, your house is preparing for the main event, the Convivium Nocturnum, the night feast of performances. Not just food, not just music. Tonight, you've commissioned a mini-festival inside your very atrium. Fringe tidbit. Some elites created private amphitheaters within their homes or gardens for these events. You haven't gone quite that far yet, but you have had the atrium floor temporarily converted into a small stage. Complete with trapdoor, You're hoping no one breaks an ankle this time. The air fills with anticipation and sandalwood incense. Guests recline on low couches arranged in a crescent, each one facing the makeshift stage like gods perched in Olympus' mezzanine. A boy juggles bronze apples. A girl dances with veils the color of coral. You sip saffron-infused wine and pretend you're not judging everyone's reactions. The centerpiece performance? A tragic monologue by a young Syrian actor with eyes like thunderclouds. He performs a piece from Euripides, Grief. Betrayal, a soliloquy to a lover long drowned. You watch your guests, noting who cries, who fidgets, and who is just trying to angle for another honeyed date. You clap first, of course. Your applause signals approval, sets the tone. Everyone else follows, some with genuine tears, others with well-timed sniffles. Later, musicians take over, lyres, flutes, one reed instrument you can't name but wish you could play. The sounds wash over the marble walls, refracting like light through water. One of your guests, emboldened by wine, begins to dance. Badly, you let it happen. It's part of the charm. In a quieter corner, poets compete. Improvised verse. Themes are shouted. Jealousy, ducks, overcooked lentils. They make it work. Somehow, you laugh until your ribs ache. Someone writes a haiku so beautiful you commission it to be inscribed in your bathhouse. The evening deepens. The performances shift. A troupe of Egyptian acrobats begins their act, balancing, flipping, human pyramids illuminated by torchlight. One woman balances upside down on a wine amphora. You nearly spill your drink in disbelief. You rise from your couch and raise a toast. Not to yourself. Of course, that would be gauche. You toast to art, to performance, to the gods who invented applause. Everyone cheers. The cat sneezes. Even the peacocks in your garden strut a little more proudly. Then comes the part you look forward to most, the private performances. The ones you invite only a few to witness. Down a torch-lit corridor. Into a smaller chamber where intimacy and candlelight soften every sound. A harpist plays an ode written in your honor. A child prodigy recites Horace with perfect cadence. You smile, sip, and let the music wrap around your bones like warm wool. And then, silence. The house slowly exhales its guests. Robes shuffle. Farewells are exchanged. Kisses on cheeks. Murmurs of gratitude. Hints at future gatherings. You stand at the threshold, radiant and untouchable, as they depart into the Roman night. The house is quiet again. Your entertainers, servants, and stray philosophers have all vanished into their respective wings. You wander through the aftermath. Traces of joy linger like perfume. Half a fig, a dropped ring, a cushion with the shape of someone's elbow still in it. You pause by your stage, now littered with petals and footprints. You smile. You step onto it. Just for a second, you imagine delivering one line. Just one. From the tragedy you watched earlier. You do. The marble catches your voice. And it's good. Not that you'd ever perform publicly. You have a reputation to protect. You retreat to your chambers. Your feet soar in a way that reminds you you've lived. Your slaves prepare your nighttime regimen. A bath scented with bay leaves and goat's milk. A whispered poem, and the soft hum of music drifting from the lower atrium. You lie in bed and think about applause, the sound, the feeling, the power. It's addictive. And for a Roman elite like you, entertainment isn't just about fun. It's how you shape perception, how you reinforce status, how you keep the world turning just the way you like it, loud, lovely, and entirely under your direction. One last image floats into your mind, that young actor's face. Tear-streaked and luminous, as he spoke of loss and longing. You wonder briefly what it would be like to feel something so deeply. Then the cat purrs, and you fall asleep instead. You wake to laughter, not raucous, not out of place, just the soft sound of someone, somewhere, enjoying a private joke. It echoes through the open halls of your domus, filtered through vines heavy with bloom and air that already smells like honeyed bread. It's a good omen, because today, you're not just watching the empire, you're shaping it. You rise slowly, because rising quickly is for people with fewer cushions. Slaves bring you morning wine, dates stuffed with almonds, and a clean toga so white it could blind a tax collector. Today is a public business day, a day of politics, persuasion, and a bit of performance. Yes, but of the civic sort. Your first stop, the Forum Romanum, the beating heart of Rome, where law and legend jostle like market stall sellers. You glide through its colonnades, trailing attendance and influence. You nod to a senator whose family you're currently bankrupting. You clasp the hand of a tribune who owes you 3 favors and a goat. A mainstream historical fact: the Roman Forum was not just a marketplace, it was the epicenter of legal proceedings, political discussions, and elite posturing. To be seen there wasn't vanity, it was strategy. You take your seat at a basilica's edge, watching the latest case unfold. Some petty land dispute, honestly. Not your circus, but the presiding judge is a cousin. And you want to make sure he remembers who gifted him that ivory stylus set. You whisper to your advocate, offer a sideways glance, and suddenly the case pivots. A favorable ruling, applause, and, delightfully, a whispered request from a rival's client to meet later in private. You've already won the day and it's not yet noon. You stroll past the Temple of Saturn, where coins are locked tighter than a Vestal's diary, and onward to your tabularium, your records office. It's tucked into the slopes of the Capitoline, near the archive vaults. Inside, slaves pore over scrolls while scribes copy financial records. You own more parchment than some provinces. Fringe tidbit: some Roman elites recorded their household expenses so obsessively that we've uncovered centuries-old grocery lists. One famously noted, 11 anchovies, slightly judgmental in smell. After a short review of estate revenues, you step outside for the real game. Lunch meetings. You've reserved a corner of a thermopolium, which might shock your peers. But you're making a point, visible humility. It lasts exactly as long as it takes for your entourage to deliver an imported wine cooler shaped like a dolphin. A young official joins you, nervous, idealistic, and just green enough to think his opinion matters. You listen, nod, and then, with the gentle grace of a lion testing its claws, remind him whose support got him his seat. He leaves with a better understanding of the world and a recommendation to buy fewer purple shoes. Historians still argue whether Roman patronage corrupted politics or preserved civic cohesion. You sip your wine and think, why not both? The afternoon draws you to the Senate. You enter the Curia Julia with a rustle of fabric and intent. Your peers, equal in title, not in power, fill the chamber. Debates swell like ocean tides. Taxation in Hispania, troop movements in Dacia, the scandalous misuse of aqueduct funds. You lean in, speak once, soft, sharp, surgical. Your words cut through the room like a legion's advance. The motion passes, not because you argued well, though you did, but because everyone knows where your influence lies. The governor of Sicily winks. The censor frowns. You consider both reactions a win. Afterward, you linger outside, chatting beneath arches carved with victories. Gossip flows like olive oil. Who's divorcing whom? Which temple priest has a gambling habit? Whether the new aqueduct design looks suspiciously like a phallus from above. You take mental notes. You always do. Back home, you change robes, something darker, more commanding. It's time for an evening salon. Not the kind with food and fiddles. The kind with power. Your cubiculum secretorum, a hidden chamber lined with scrolls and silver, becomes tonight's venue. 5 guests only, all important, all needing something. You recline as they enter. They bring documents, maps, offers, a marriage alliance, a shipping deal in Alexandria, a chance to purchase a failing vineyard whose location is suspiciously close to a new road project you're not supposed to know about. You agree to most of it, gracefully. One man you turn down flat, not because it's a bad offer, but because he once called you pedantic at a poetry reading. You've never forgotten. Deals sealed with nods, hands, and veiled threats. Your guests leave lighter, not in coin, but in burden. You've taken on their worries. For a price. You're not just a senator. You're a center of gravity. And you're good at it. You walk the halls of your home afterward, bare feet against cool marble. You pause at a wall map of the empire. Red pins marking your business interests. There are too many to count now. You wonder what your father would say, then remember you paid for a statue of him just to ensure he'd always look proud. Dinner tonight is small, introspective. You eat in your study, surrounded by letters. One from a friend in Antioch. describing a new kind of spice that tastes like cinnamon but smells like thunder. One from a poet in exile, begging you to sponsor his return. One from your sister, reminding you she still exists. You reply to two, you file the rest. And then, quiet. The kind of quiet that hums with potential. You walk outside, to your rooftop garden. From here, the city pulses beneath you, flickering torches. Distant music, the soft chaos of 1,000 intertwined lives. You sip a final drink, gaze at the stars, and wonder, not for the first time, whether you'll be remembered for what you did, or for how you made people feel while doing it. A question for the ages. Tomorrow, there's another vote, another dinner, another poor fool who thinks he can outmaneuver you with charm and half a wine amphora. But tonight, you are still, a man in the center of the world, surrounded by the weight of a civilization that, thanks to people like you, hasn't yet collapsed under its own excess. You take a deep breath. You smile. You sleep. The sun hasn't even cleared the rooftops when you begin today's indulgence. Introspection. Not the tortured, moody kind with scribbled verses and moonlit tears. No, you approach self-reflection like everything else, deliberately, luxuriously, and with help. You're in your pergola, the shaded rooftop retreat laced with ivy and grapevines. The city's a muffled hum below. A slave gently fans you while another grinds sandalwood paste into your shoulders. You're wrapped in a linen robe that cost more than a legionary's annual salary. But of course you are. Today's schedule is light on politics, heavy on legacy. You've ordered your scribes to prepare your commentary, your personal memoirs. These aren't for public consumption, yet, but they must read like marble inscriptions dipped in honey. You dictate slowly, lounging like a cross between a philosopher and a lizard in the sun. The opening lines? In the 3rd year of the consulship of Lucius Julius and Gaius Marcellus, I found the Republic in need of a voice, and chose my own. Modest, right? A mainstream historical fact. Prominent Roman elites often commissioned or wrote their own memoirs, speeches, and ancestral histories, not only to preserve their name but to influence how history would remember them. Cicero himself edited his letters obsessively. You pause dictation for a moment to ponder the family line. There's a portrait bust of your grandfather nearby. Eternally smug, he made his fortune on grain speculation during a famine. Not illegal, per se. Just breathtakingly opportunistic. You think he'd be proud of how you've taken manipulation to a more elegant level. You order the scribes to insert a paragraph about your recent funding of public fountains. You frame it as altruism. The truth? You're sick of the neighbor's dog drinking from your cistern. From legacy to lineage, your adopted son visits. He's young, well-mannered, and only slightly more interested in gladiators than governance. You take him on a walk through your estate's tablinum, pointing out the ancestral masks. Each is a clay whisper, a reminder that immortality in Rome is measured in memory. Remember this, you tell him. Wealth fades, marble crumbles, but well-placed favors last forever. He nods. You think he gets it. Then he asks if he can commission a pet leopard. You say yes. You're not a monster. You spend midday in your private library. Rows of scrolls, cataloged by topic. War, oratory, botany, scandal, today's choice, philosophy. You skim some Seneca, frown at Plato, pretentious, as always, and finally settle on a treatise about otium, the Roman ideal of leisure with purpose. The passage is perfect. True leisure is not inactivity but controlled withdrawal. You underline it with a stylus dipped in red ink. Then immediately schedule a banquet. Fringe tidbit. Some Roman elites commissioned their own, reading slaves, to recite texts aloud while they reclined and nibbled on walnuts. You have 3. They take turns so no one strains their voice. You're considerate like that. Afternoon shadows lengthen. You take a short nap. Dreams of a triumphal parade with your face on every banner. Not that you crave recognition, it's just aesthetically pleasing. When you wake, you receive a sealed message from a client in Gaul. There's a local rebellion brewing. Taxes are being dodged, and the new governor has the leadership instincts of a boiled cabbage. You dictate a letter in response, careful wording, veiled threats, a quote from Homer to make it classy. Historians still argue whether Roman provincial control was held together more by administrative structure or sheer bribery. You're firmly on team, why not both? The evening brings an unexpected guest, a haruspex, a priest who reads omens from animal entrails. You didn't request him, but apparently your cousin did. After dreaming of two snakes coiling around a loaf of bread, you indulge him. A sacrificial chicken is brought in. The priest examines its liver with the intensity of a man trying to solve a murder. There is tension in your future, he says, dramatically. You thank him, tip him generously, and remind yourself to never eat that chicken. Later, your Greek tutor joins you in the garden for one of your favorite rituals, argument. Not shouting, elevated debate. Today's topic: which is superior, Roman engineering or Greek wisdom? You take the Roman side, of course. You reference roads, aqueducts, and bathhouse acoustics. He counters with Aristotle and moral virtue. You eventually concede, if only to maintain the illusion that you value humility. Dinner is taken alone, not lonely, just peaceful. You're served oysters, pomegranate seeds, and a roasted pheasant stuffed with herbs no longer found in the wild. You eat slowly, each bite like a punctuation mark in a poem about indulgence. You write in your personal journal. Today's entry: spoke with gods, bickered with men, ate like one of both. You seal it with wax. Not that you think anyone will read it, but if they do, they'll know you were always in on the joke. Just before sleep, you visit your garden's quietest corner, a shrine to your mother. She was the one who taught you to listen twice as much as you speak. Unless wine is involved, you place a fresh bloom beside her statue. You whisper thanks. The stars are out. The cat is curled at your feet. The empire still stands. Your influence grows. And somewhere, in a library yet to be built, your name will be inked by someone who owes their life to a decision you made in a moment just like this one. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, the Senate will bicker. Provinces will complain. Poets will flatter. And you'll do exactly what you've always done. Shape the world. Sip by sip, word by word, with the quiet confidence of a man who already knows how the story ends. This morning, you rise with a particular itch, not metaphorical. Thank the gods, but the kind that whispers. It's time to build something. You've amassed wealth, power, and favors like apples in autumn. But today, your appetite shifts. Today is about monuments, not just marble and mortar, but immortality carved in stone. You stretch, draped in an embroidered synthesis, and step onto the mosaic floor of your bath chamber. Steam hisses from bronze pipes. Perfumed oils await, and bath slaves adjust the temperature like you're a fragile pastry. As they work, you study a miniature model of your next grand project. A public library, with a statue of you in the vestibule. Naturally, it's not vanity, it's visibility. A mainstream historical fact. Roman elites often sponsored public works, baths, temples, libraries, markets, not only for civic pride but to cement their legacy and curry favor with the masses. These acts of munificence, public generosity, were often as political as they were philanthropic. While olive oil is being massaged into your scalp, you mull over where the cornerstone should go. Should it align with the morning sun on Augustus' birthday? Or maybe with your own name inlaid beneath the first shelf of scrolls? Later that morning, you meet your architect under a colonnade. He's sweating, nervous, slightly singed from a collapsed dome last year. You wave it off. This is Rome. If everything stood the first time, we'd still be Etruscans. You inspect samples of imported marble, Numidian yellow, Phrygian purple, Luna white. You settle on a blend. I wanted to whisper, empire, with every footstep. You say. He nods like he understands. But you know he'll still mess up the cornices. Your next stop. The construction site of your new horium. A warehouse the size of a provincial town square. It's not glamorous, but you're secretly proud of it. It stores grain, wine, and those regrettable imported cheeses you overinvested in last year. You watch the workers haul stones while engineers shout about angles and shadows. One of them casually mentions something about structural integrity, and you smile. That's his problem. Your job is to point dramatically and say, higher. Fringe tidbit. Romans sometimes buried coins or small figurines under foundational stones as offerings to the gods or symbols of luck. You choose a tiny silver dolphin because you once won a bet on a dolphin race. And you believe in poetic symmetry. Around midday, You visit your opus imaginum, a workshop devoted solely to crafting your likeness. Yes, you have an entire studio for statues of you. Don't act surprised. Sculptors pause as you enter, dusting off their tunics. Half-finished busts stare at you with unsettling uniformity. One has too much chin. Another looks suspiciously like your cousin. You stop in front of the best one, strong jaw, furrowed brow, hint of benevolent patience. You made me look kind. You say, was that deliberate? The artist laughs, nervously. It's more difficult than you think. Domini. You let it slide. You pick out a statue to be placed in the library's atrium. It shows you holding a scroll in one hand and gesturing forward with the other. Like your mid-wisdom, you dine privately today. No guests. Just a view of your aqueduct garden and a bowl of warm olives. You reflect, slowly, on how many places your name is now etched, on library stones, on temple plaques, on the base of fountains splashing clean water into tired palms. And yet, you want more, not greed, just permanence. You pull out parchment and begin to sketch your own mausoleum. Not because you're morbid, but because you're organized. It should be circular, echoing Hadrian's, but taller, with lions, definitely lions. Perhaps an eternal flame? You add a note. No pigeons on my statue. Invent deterrent. Historians still argue whether Roman mausoleums were genuine acts of remembrance or architectural vanity projects. But really, what's the difference? In the evening, you host a small convivium, a dinner for designers, scholars, and poets. The goal? Inspiration. Wine flows. Ideas swirl. One poet suggests an ode inscribed on the arch above the library's entrance, from silence. Knowledge rises. You consider it, then suggest, funded by the generosity of, followed by your full 12-name lineage. After dinner, you surprise the party with a torch-lit walk to your nympheum, a newly finished fountain complex designed to mimic a grotto. Complete with trickling water, singing stones, and faintly erotic statuary, tasteful. Naturally, your guests swoon. One declares it, like bathing in a god's daydream. You casually mention it cost more than a warship. Laughter follows. The good kind. The kind that confirms you've left your mark without pressing too hard. You retreat late into your study. Outside, Rome glimmers under moonlight. Somewhere, children play near a fountain you paid for. A merchant tallies grain in your warehouse. A librarian stacks scrolls beneath your name. You scratch down a new plan. A bath complex. But underground, heated with volcanic stones. Maybe even music piped through copper tubes. Ambitious? Of course. But this is Rome. You're not remembered for being sensible. As you undress, you glance at a marble tablet with your motto chiseled in Greek. Lasting is the hand that builds. You believe it, and in the shadows of eternity, you can already hear your footsteps echoing across the stones of history. Tonight, you don't sleep immediately, not because you're troubled. Trouble is for lesser men, but because you can feel Rome breathing. Its breath reaches you even here, deep in your garden courtyard, warm with the scent of crushed laurel and wet travertine. The wind carries a murmur from the Sabura district far below, where someone is arguing about grain prices, or love, or both. You sip chilled spiced wine and exhale, watching the moonlight catch the gold threads in your robe. You've done so much, built, ruled, dined, bribed, blessed, and still, there's one final indulgence that the Roman elite adore more than banquets. Politics, or imported cinnamon, reputation management. Not just public image, not gossip control, but the full-on, scorched earth theater of curating how the world will remember you. You summon your scribes. They're half asleep, sandals sloppy on marble, scrolls flapping like sleepy wings. One carries your genealogical records. Another has draft epitaphs. The third holds wax tablets filled with praises written in multiple dialects. Because no one should forget any version of your greatness. A mainstream historical fact. Roman elites often planned their funerals and public funerary monuments years before their death, including the guest list, the professional mourners, and the posthumous publications of their deeds. You've had yours rehearsed twice. You dictate adjustments to your epitaph. Shorter, pithier. He left Rome better than he found it. That's nice, subtle, noble. You pause, add, and left no debts. Because, honestly, That's rarer than virtue. Your personal historian enters. Yes. You have one. He's been recording your life. Like Livy if Livy were terrified of being exiled for typos. He's here to show you the updated life of you scrolls. You leaf through with idle interest. One passage catches your eye, and in his dealings, he was never cruel without cause. You chuckle. Let's underline without cause. He hesitates. Some might say it implies that I was cruel with cause. You finish. Exactly. It sounds judicious. Fringe tidbit. Wealthy Romans sometimes hired actors to perform mock orations at their own funerals, while they were still alive, just to test how their eulogies would land. You've thought about it, but your cousin weeps at everything, and you don't trust him not to derail the tone. Later, you walk among your household shrines. A bust of your father stares down from an alcove. You wonder if he'd be impressed, or if he'd grumble about your taste in wall mosaics. Either way, he's silent, and silence is consent. You pass your chamberlain on the way out. He's lighting incense and murmuring over a clay tablet where you've sketched the layout of your tomb again, this time with an attached amphitheater. You add a note. Open on weekends. You want the people to enjoy your afterlife. 2. Historians still argue whether this obsession with legacy came from genuine reverence for ancestry or a deep-seated Roman fear of oblivion. You prefer to believe it's ambition, channeled into marble. At the outer gate, you meet a young orator from the provinces. He's barely 20, shaking slightly, here to read you a speech he wrote in your honor. He's terrified you'll hate it. You listen patiently, arms crossed, until he gets to the line, and through his wisdom, he tamed fortune herself. You nod, just once. Good cadence. Keep that. You hand him a coin. More than he expected, less than your sandals are worth. He looks at you like you're already a legend. As dawn bleeds into the sky, you return to your chamber and lie down. Your room is cool, shadows stretching long and soft across ivory walls. A slave gently pulls the linen sheet up over you. You close your eyes, listening to the wind rustle the laurels, to the low thrum of a city that you, in many ways, own. And in that moment, half asleep, wholly at peace, you realize something important. Not everything you've built will last. Some stones will crumble, some names will fade, but even in the forgetting, something of you remains. A statue's nose may fall, a fountain may dry, but your choices ripple out, through streets, through whispers, through dreams, and eventually, into other hands. And that's what eternity really is. Not a temple, not a poem, but the small ways the world bends slightly around you. Even after you're gone, you smile. It's a good night to sleep. And now, your story settles. The lamps are dim, the fountains hush, the last chariot has passed beyond the city's gates, and the ashes of torches drift like fireflies on the wind. You lie still, just listening, hearing not just the breath of Rome but something gentler, the weight of time itself, folding softly around your shoulders. Let your mind float backward now, through quiet basilicas and garden porticos, across marbled halls and murmured treaties, over the laughter of reclining guests and the hum of bees in imported fig trees. Let it glide past every golden coin bearing your name, every carefully placed mosaic tile, every scroll that still smells of ink and ambition. They will speak of you for years. Or they won't, but the things you loved, wine at dusk, olive trees in wind, the thrill of being remembered, those things remain. So drift gently now, as if you were reclining in the warm frigidarium waters. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let your breath slow, like a censer burning low. Whatever legacy you've built, be it marble or memory, it's enough. You've shaped your world. You've worn your wealth. You've whispered back to history and heard it echo your name. Rest now, surrounded by statues, warmed by the sunstone of empires. The world is quiet, and you are home.